Let's get to the news of the day. Donald Trump is going to Davos. It's being held in Switzerland right now. It's an annual event. I didn't realize Davos has been going on for over 50 years. It's where all the world's billionaires choose to congregate and decide how the world is going to be run according to their vision. There's no democracy in Davos. It's just a bunch of self-important people with a lot of power, basically because of monetary power, but they're also world leaders and representatives of the world's leading countries that are there to collaborate. I think it's probably a good thing that they meet and talk, but I don't think it's a good thing that they set the agenda for the world. I think the people of the world should set the agenda for the world. What do you think? I'd be interested to hear from you. You can call us at 1-888-480-JOHN, and that's as in John Fredericks, not John Gordon, but hey, you know what? Fake it till you'll make it. I'll take it. 888-480-5646. Let me know what you think. Davos, are you like it or not so much? Um, Tomorrow marks the 1 year anniversary of Donald Trump's taking the oath of office for his second term. And he had responded to a question from the Epoch Times, which, by the way, is one of my absolute favorite sources of news. They really do get it right, I think. They do tend to appear to be conservative, but what I really think they do is just tell the truth. That would be a novel concept for many of the Democrats across the country today. And so we're going to be, I'm going to talk about Trump's accomplishments in just a second, but let me just tell you, you're going to want to stay tuned today. We've got Rich McCormick coming up at the bottom of the hour, and then we've got the Georgia Peaches, Debbie Dooley and her crew, along with Jackie Hartley, and Christine James will be on at the top of the next hour, and we're going to break down what's going on in Georgia. And I'm sure we will spend some time talking about what's the matter with Georgia. Trump's second term, it restored my faith in God, really, when he was reelected for a second term. There was a period that I thought we had lost. I thought we had lost the battle after 2020. I fought for and looked at the 2020 election for basically 2.5, 3 years of my life. I was pleased to have been invited to help Bob Shealy, Charles Bundern, and Preston Halliburton on a case that they brought against the Fulton Board of Elections. And so I got a front row seat. I was not a lawyer on the case. I was responsible for fundraising and communications. I traveled the state giving presentations about what happened in 2020. I was devastated. It is my belief, folks, that if we don't have a franchise, that we don't have a republic. And we lost our franchise in 2020. And much of what we were telling people back then has been proven to be true today, because now we've had the revelation that 170 of the tabulator tapes were not signed in accordance with Georgia state law. Therefore, over 300,000 votes, 320, I think is the number, were certified illegally. So that is and I'd gone around the state telling people that there were 40,000 illegal votes in Fulton County based on the evidence that we had at that time, duplicate ballots, people voting from UPS stores, homeless shelters, churches, abandoned apartment buildings, people registered to vote when sorted by first name. Their registration numbers were perfectly sequential, 14,000 of those people. And then, of course, there was 2,000 mules that showed all of the ballot harvesting that took place in Georgia in 2020. Virtually everything that we've said has been validated. And the greatest validation was when Fonnie Willis, who sought to indict 19 patriots, which I thought was the lowest of the low of any public servant. If that was not lawfare and abuse of her privilege as a trusted public servant, I don't know what was. That came unraveled when, as Debbie Dooley informed me a little while ago, she affectionately refers to Nathan Wade as Fani Willis's boy toy. I think that's an accurate description, but we learned that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade traveled all over the United States. At the we assume, and I think rightfully so, that at the taxpayer funded dollars, because Fani Willis paid Nathan Wade $650,000. She also lied. She said that she didn't have a relationship with him until 2021. But the fact of the matter is, there is evidence that they were an item in 2019. So we can also add home wrecker to the list of descriptors for Fani Willis. Why she is still the DA, I don't know. I want to get into that with the Georgia Peaches a little later in the show. But let's get back to Trump's accomplishments. In the Epoch Times, he listed as his three big accomplishments: rebuilding our military. The annual expenditures now exceed $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. Not quite raising to the level of our interest payments on the $37 trillion of debt that we have, but nevertheless, the second largest line item in the federal budget. And then President Trump says that's what has enabled him to go and clean up Venezuela. Now, some people may think it has to do with fentanyl. I happen to believe that fentanyl is not part of the equation. Maybe that is a added benefit that we get. I think, and some people think that it has to do with oil. We really have enough oil in the ground in this country. We don't really need Venezuela's oil. What we need to do is reduce the regulations and make it easier to explore for new oil, and also make it easier to frack and exploit our own resources. We probably have enough oil to last for anyone listening to the broadcast lifetime this morning. But nevertheless, fentanyl, oil, those have been the rationalizations. I think it has everything to do with what we're seeing as truly a new world order that is unfolding in real time right before our very eyes. And I think many people are asleep and not realizing it. But you've got Russia that is moving in on the Ukraine. They want Ukraine for themselves. China has been making noise about annexing Taiwan for many years now. They are conducting military exercises in the oceans adjacent to Taiwan. And President Trump is saying, okay, fine, fellas, you want to be aggressive in your parts of the world? We're going to protect our flanks. Ergo, Venezuela is now under the rule of President Trump, who is acting as the temporary president. There are also rumblings that we're going to look at Colombia, and we've also imposed huge embargoes and sanctions on Cuba. The oil that flowed out of Venezuela, a lot of it was going to Cuba. That was against the sanctions. And so Cuba is really on their heels. Economically, they are in horrible shape. And so will the Cuban government collapse, and will we move in and finally have our tentacles in Cuba? So you look at it, that would give us a lot of protection to the south. Mexico's already an ally of sorts. But even in Mexico, Trump has said that if Mexico doesn't get control of the cartels, that we will. We've offered to come into Mexico and assist with our military in getting the cartels out of the country. I think the president of Mexico is scared to death because the cartels really do wield unbelievable power within Mexico. So, and don't forget Panama. President Trump is saying, no, in China, you are not going to come into Panama and control the canal. They are getting favored treatment. They are charging our vessels more to go through the Panama Canal than the Chinese ships. And President Trump has said no. If you don't get this under control, we're going to take back over the Panama Canal. So when you zoom out to 30,000 feet, we've got a lot of protection on the southern border. But then you've got Russia and China conducting exercises, submarine exercises adjacent to Greenland. And so a lot of people just say, oh, this is so wrong. Trump is going to try and take over Greenland. Well, yeah, not militarily. He wants to buy Greenland. You know how many people live in Greenland? 30,000. It's a very sparsely populated area, and it is very unfriendly to human inhabitants. It's just really a big sheet of ice, and it's cold, and the weather is miserable. The fog rolls in, the fog rolls out. It's raining most of the time, and when it's not raining, it's snowing. So who in the heck would want to live in Greenland? It's not because he wants to build a golf course there. I assure you of that. It is for our own national security because, the Danes just aren't capable of protecting their nation like we would be. So he sent Steve Wyckoff along with Secretary Rubio to meet with the Danes to talk about our annexing Greenland or purchasing it from Denmark, and they don't want to do it. Well, I think Trump is going to apply so much pressure that they really won't have any choice. And, there's parts of it that I don't like. I'm kind of, I guess my knee-jerk reaction is I would like to work within the bounds of our country. But the fact of the matter is sometimes you just got to put your big boy pants on and realize that we don't live on an island. We cannot survive in this world. We're all, to a large degree, interdependent on one another. Even with our nemesis, China, we are dependent on China for many of our minerals and, right now, pharmaceuticals. But as Trump pointed out, one of his second biggest accomplishments is $18 trillion in pledged investment inside the United States. Imagine that. Do you know that our federal government's annual budget, I think, is at $4 trillion? So just look at that. That's over 4 times the size of our national budget on an annual basis. That is huge amounts of money, new money, coming into America. And the result will be jobs for American citizens. What a tremendous accomplishment that is. And, I said 37 trillion in debt. Now that's scary. And the interest on that debt is now $1 trillion a year. Those are real numbers. And one of the things that concerns me about President Trump is that, from my take, I don't think he's attacking the deficit and the debt as aggressively as I would prefer him to do it. But it is clear to me that his strategy is that we'll increase this country's GDP and will outrun the debt. Well, I think that sounds great if he can do it, but it's also a very risky strategy. What if we fail? What if that strategy doesn't work? So I would advocate a two-pronged approach that, one, we attack the debt and reduce it while increasing the GDP, then we outrun it. We win both ways. Now, I saw Scott Bessent on an interview with Maria Bartiromo just yesterday from Davos. He is one smart guy, and I think he's probably among the most respected of Trump's cabinet. And there are a lot of really good people in Trump's cabinet. It is an all-star cast. It truly is. But Bessent said that the percent of our debt to GDP has already fallen from 6% to 5.2%, and that's just in 12 months. And a large source of that debt reduction is coming from, anybody care to venture a guess? Tariffs. Hundreds of millions of dollars of newfound revenue is flooding into our nation's coffers as a result of tariffs. Now, the Supreme Court is going to rule any day now whether that President Trump is authorized under his emergency powers to tariff foreign countries. Now, I predict that the Supreme Court is going to render a decision and that they will say no, that President Trump lacks the power to tariff people or other countries under the emergency powers. But I do believe that they will come back with nuanced exceptions legitimizing the majority of the tariffs. So if the Supreme Court were to rule against Trump on all levels and the tariffs had to stop and God forbid they'd have to be repaid, they would wreck our economy. It would be devastating for our economy right now because Trump has got it moving everything all in the right directions. And if you listen to The Truth on Saturdays, you've heard me and our guests talk about this a lot. Anthony, how are we doing on time here? We got a break coming up sometime, don't we? Okay. Well, Michael, text us and tell us how much time we got before the break, if you would, because I don't want to blow your run of the show. Um, the economy is just performing miraculously. You look at it, we've got the tariffs, hundreds of billions of dollars. It's estimated that tariffs are going to produce $600 billion in 2026. That's phenomenal. That is material significant. Just please, justices of the Supreme Court, don't mess it up for us. Find those nuanced exceptions so we can keep running down that track. Two, the big, beautiful bill hasn't even shown up yet, but it's about to. The amount of money that taxpayers are going to gain from this is just going to show up in 2026. It is going to be hugely beneficial to the consumer confidence and consumer spending. That's the biggest source of segment of our economy. That is going to be significant. We've got also deregulation that is going to help businesses spend and do so faster. That 18 trillion dollars. We had the fires in California a year ago. Out of 650 homes that were devastated, and I'm speaking in round numbers, do you know how many new building permits have been issued a year later? 30. That's the problem with government. So President Trump is deregulating in the federal government. In fact, he has said for every new regulation a bureaucrat wants to bring to the table, they've got to bring 10 regulations with them that will be eliminated. So that is going to be significant. One of the most significant parts of our economy is the cost of energy. It is pervasive. It affects every single thing that we eat, drink, drive, consume. Petroleum is part of the manufacturing process at every single level. And in plastics, it's a big part of the ingredients. And so the price of petroleum has come down remarkably. In fact, it would be unbelievable if you took California out of the equation. But even with California in the cost of automobile petroleum fuel, gasoline, it's like $3.20 a gallon, and that's down from $4.80, I think, at the high when Biden was our illegitimate president. just a year ago. What a difference a year makes. So we have those elements that I spoke about. What else have we got coming down the pike? We've got the investment that is coming. Jerome Powell. He finally showed up for the party. We've had 0.25 point reductions in interest rates, plus the 0.5 point that he gave us a year ago, over a year ago, uh, just before the 2024 election. Most people thought that was election tampering. I do as well. And but nevertheless, that's the whole point of reduced cost of borrowing money. They promised us 2 more cuts this year. That will probably be another 0.5 point. So that is going to help our economy. And so I agree with President Trump. His his economic policies are working. We have only seen the beginning of it. Then finally, the border. And the border is closed. Uh, Biden lacked congressional authority to close the border, but with the enactment of no new laws, President Trump has closed the border. I don't mean he's reduced it to a trickle, I mean he's closed it. And now we're seeing the effects of deportation. It's messy. Mistakes have been made, they will continue to be made. And then we've got Alligator Alcatraz about 2 hours from where I'm sitting right now. I don't like it. I think it's inhumane. I wish they would close it. I mean, I'm all in favor of what Trump is doing to deport illegals in this country. I think it's a longer conversation that we need to have. I have talked about the Gordon Plan on The Truth with John Gordon on the John Fredericks Radio Network every Saturday and Sunday. I hope you'll tune in from noon to 2. You can also watch us on Getter, Rumble, X, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. Are we out of time? We got to go to a break, Anthony? Anthony is telling us that Michael is telling us that we got to go to a break. But that's the bad news. The good news is we'll be right back. And I'm not done. I got more to talk about. And we got Rich McCormick coming up right after the break. I host The Truth with John Gordon every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 2 o'clock on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're also live on Getter, Rumble, YouTube, X, and what I'll leave out, Anthony, I'm sure, Facebook. So if you like what we are putting out, consider going to one of those pages and subscribing. We'd love to have you. Hit the notification button. You'll know when we drop a new segment. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to our listeners now Congressman Rich McCormick from the great state of Georgia. Congressman McCormick, my friend, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good to be with you today.
So did you hear any of the monologue this morning leading into your introduction?
I did not. We're actually trying to read up on some PBMs and healthcare businesses and some of the other things that are going to be added to this healthcare bill that the president has proposed.
Well, I'm not hurt, but I've spent a lot of time talking about President Trump's first year in office, in his second term, and just in my view, the unbelievably remarkable job this guy has performed. I think he works 15 to 18 hours a day. He does it for the American people. He already had fame, he already had fortune, and he had the distinction of being a successful president. He really didn't need to do it. And but the fact is he did, and it has been wonderful, I believe, for our country. Let's start off and let me ask you, what do you think about annexing Greenland?
I think it'd be a good thing for America. I think it'd be a good thing for Greenland. I think it actually would have many benefits for Europe in the way it strategically benefits stability of that Arctic region. As any military people know, that we've always had a polar cap up there, and we've broken through it with submarines, and we've explored it, and we have bases up in that area. But Russia is far more advanced, has far more bases up in that region, and China wants to have a foothold. If we don't have that area secured, and it's a large landmass with a ton of water, a ton of natural resources, and very strategically located, it puts us at a huge disadvantage, especially at a time where China and Russia are looking forward to expanding their imprint in that region. Now, the way we do it is what matters, of course, and President Trump uses every tool in the box to leverage that to get what he wants. Some people don't like it. I was just with some Europeans last night that are ambassadors, and their concerns are understood. And I understand why people don't like to be strong armed. But this is all leverage points. When you look at how Trump gets things done, he purposely trolls the media. He says he trolls the media in order to get a response, to get people to focus on something he wants them to focus on, so we can actually get a solution to a problem.
Well, and I pointed out that Russia is trying to take over parts or all of the Ukraine. China wants to move in on Taiwan. Will they? Will they get it? Who knows? But don't you think that there is a new world order that's sort of playing out in real time right
Of course
before our
there
very
is.
eyes? And we can either sit back and wait for the tooth fairy, or we can say, look, this is the world we live in, and we've got to play the game as
We
our adversaries are.
we've had our head buried in the sand for a very long time. During the Biden administration, we were not paying attention. And Ukraine's not the only problem. And yes, I agree that if President Trump was president, they would have never invaded Ukraine to begin with. Remember, the first invasion of Crimea was during Obama's administration. The second was during Biden's administration.
100%.
But if you look at just the Western Hemisphere, their influence, China and Russia's influence on Venezuela, which they had people on the ground there, not just Cuba. And Cuba's a bad influencer too, by the way, in the Western Hemisphere, but their influence in Brazil and other places in Central and South America. It's very worrisome. You do not want these bad actors having a foothold in the Western Hemisphere. It's against everything we've ever studied on the Monroe Doctrine. It's why we have to make sure that we exert our influence and that we're not usurped by those bad actors.
And is it your opinion that Venezuela falls into that same category, and that's
It,
probably more to do with the motivation than fentanyl or oil?
Well, considering their natural resources and their proximity to the United States, look, Cuba needs to be dealt with too. Quite
Yeah,
frankly, it's
we
long
talked about that.
overdue. But we keep on doing these half measures. I hate half measures. It never
Mm,
benefits the United States. Either you're a bad guy or a good guy. If you're a bad guy, come hard. I mean, Russia could have been crushed a long time ago. And I mean a long time ago. They have a $2.1 trillion GDP. Texas has a $2.7 trillion GDP. Germany has a $5 trillion GDP. Collectively, Europe has a $20 trillion GDP, 10 times the size of Russia. So when we talk about the unfair advantage that Russia has over Ukraine, Europe has exactly the same advantage over Russia. And that's without the United States involved, which has $30 trillion. We could
well,
sanction them into oblivion even without the military use.
well, there's one deterrent there, and that is their nuclear arsenal. They're also the second most powerful, have the second most powerful nuclear collection of any country on Earth. And so
But
I think
this
that's
is
why
why
we
it's
give
really
them
important to
undue deference.
address. Yeah, this is why it's really important to address Iran's nuclear program and to never let them get a foothold. Because once you get a foothold in nuclear capabilities, that's why India and Pakistan and North Korea can all deal from a different position of power. Makes it much more tricky, as you were just alluding to.
So, Congressman, since I am a firm believer in meritocracy, we have a caller that has been patient for a long time this morning, and I invited him to invited callers to call. So I better go to Rob. He's on right now with us. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Hey, John. Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I never got a chance to speak with you, but I know John speaks highly of you. And Congressman McCormick, great to meet you, even if it's over the phone. I wanted to answer your original question that you started
Hmm.
off with. What do we think about Davos? And the answer is it's a playground for the elites. But I do think Trump should go because Trump doesn't go there to kiss ass. He goes there to chuck grenades and to throw bombs, which, proverbially speaking, of course. Um, and they need that. The world needs to see that we have a leader. We're not going to have America, America first. We're not going to roll over. Republican Party, on the other hand, that's a different story because I hate to say this. I mean, the party just doesn't fight. So it's nice to have at least the leader of the party get up there and stick it to these elites.
Well,
Because
I
when I
have
read
to
this morning,
agree with you, Rob. Where are you calling from, by the way?
oh, I'm in New York. I'm in Westchester County, a little north of New York City.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for
Actually,
calling. Let's unpack what Rob spoke about, Congressman. I happen to agree with him that Davos is the playground for the elites, but it's more than a playground. I mean, they're talking serious stuff there. And a lot of those folks seem to want a new world order. And as long as they can be in charge, I think that's the scary part. Many of these people have not been elected to anything. So when you said you were meeting with some European diplomats last night, you're not in Davos, are you?
No, these are ambassadors. These are people here in America that have been appointed that have
So
Europe's best interest
what do you think about
in
Rob's insightfulness about the elite meeting in Davos every year? And it's been going on for over 50 years, and they want to impose their beliefs on the rest of the world. Your thoughts?
Sure. We have groups like that here in America too. We have elite people who have more money than Davos. If
Mm,
you start collecting the people here, if you consider how the central banking system was set up here, it was an elite group of people who met at Jekyll Island
that's
that
right.
changed the course of not only America but the world. But I do want to address one of the things he said about fighting and uniting. The Republicans have never been more united than this point of time with this narrow majority. President Trump's been able to exert his influence. And when we don't vote for something, sometimes it's not the most conservative thing when we pass things. And I don't like it. And I'm one of the holdouts a lot of times, but I don't make President Trump call me. That annoys him. He doesn't like it. But if you don't play the game, President Trump will exert enormous pressure on you to actually vote for something, even when it's not the most conservative thing ever, because he realized that it's the best thing you can get. So realize with a very slim majority, sometimes we have to swallow our pride and vote for something that's not as good as we want, knowing that if we try to get something more, and this is President Trump coming to our conference saying, I know this is not what you want. I know you want more. I know you want to be more conservative, but if you don't vote for this, you're going to get something worse. And that's what we have to face when these appropriations bills come up this week. If we don't pass it, you'll almost certainly get something worse. And that's straight from President Trump's mouth. So we are playing ball. And some people who are much more conservative like myself sometimes vote for bills we don't want to because it's the best thing we can. Because quite frankly, we have to end the debate in the Senate. Now, this is an interesting time. This is something we haven't talked a lot about. You can actually let it run its course. You don't need 60 votes. If you let every single Democrat talk as long as they want to twice, it will take weeks, but you will pass it with a simple majority. Usually we don't have that sort of time. In this case, we actually do. If you really force the closure of the government, it may last a couple of weeks, but we would get the vote we wanted to because we do have the simple majority, and that would be an interesting play by Senator Thune that hasn't been used in a very, very long time.
So, what is life like as a congressman? We on the truth, we talk a lot about the deep state, and I don't know where your thoughts are. I was home from the fourth grade in November 22nd, 1963. I have the advantage of experience over you, Congressman. So I've lived a long time. But I was home when John Kennedy was killed, and I've had somewhat of an unhealthy obsession, but maybe it's a healthy obsession actually, because I think today that I've come to the conclusion, at least, that our own government killed John Kennedy and the CIA carried it out, LBJ ordered it, and the FBI covered it up. That's my paradigm. And I think with a lot of evidence to support that. That is really pretty demonic when you think about it. And then we've lived through other tragedies like the implosion of Building 7, the attempted assassination on President Trump, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who I knew and Charlie had been on the truth. I was not his best friend, or probably not even a friend, but more than a casual acquaintance. We saw each other 2 or 3 times a year for the last 8 years and were cordial towards one another. And that really sucker punched me in the gut. I mean, it hit me to my core because at 72 years, I've never met a smarter human being, a more devout human being, and a more patriotic human being. And for him to be stripped from us and taken away, I'm not buying the official narrative. I'm not buying that Tyler Robinson acting alone. But do you worry about the deep state? Do you consider it to be real? Or am I just a senile old man who's gone conspiratorialist?
Well, I was just with Charlie Kirk's father this weekend by chance at an event, really, really neat by Freedom Freedom House and the the Job Creators Network. Great patriot, very humble man. I will tell you the bigger problem we have right now is not with those individual actors. And you could say there's a conspiracy against people like Charlie. There's a lot of people who want to kill us.
Mm.
That's why we basically have security now in Congress, because people are openly plotting not just to kill the president, but kill people like Charlie and other leaders in this community. But really, what's scary, if you read Kash Patel's book, which I'm almost done with right now, on corruption in the CIA, in the FBI, in doing things not necessarily like assassinations, but assassinating your character and going after people legally, trying to put President Trump in jail, trying to keep him from actually running for president. This stuff's been going on for a long time. The weaponization of the United States government is one of the scariest things you'll ever see. If anybody's ever read the book Gulag Archipelago by Stolichninin, you would see how once a government gets out of control, the only way it stays in power is to continue oppressing its people. That's why socialism leads to communism, which leads to dictatorships, which leads to death. That's why the Khmer Rouge killed millions of people. That's why Gulag Archipelago killed 60 million people in about 40 years.
Okay.
It always leads to obstruction of justice and prosecution of the wrong people. It's happened in Brazil recently. It's happened obviously in Venezuela, Colombia, all over the world, and in the United States is the most shocking thing of all. In the United States, a country that's based on balance of power, they got away with it against many of us.
Okay, but what about the deep state? Do you consider it to be a real and something to be concerned about? Have you felt pressured at any time from quarters within our government that you sort of gave you the creeps?
I've never felt pressure directly, but I will tell you that Kash Patel book exposes that deep state. It is deep state. The bureaucracy that we have, we can't fire people that have been around for 40 years doing a horrible job and actually obstruct the president from getting his job done. That is the deep state. Those are the people that wait you out. And remember that are hired from DC, which is about 93% Democrat. So the deep state is against all of us, but especially against conservative thinking. It is integrated with a cancer known as liberalism.
Well, I appreciate your candor on it. It is a concern of mine. We only have about 3 minutes left. Let me just ask you two things. One, do you think you can get meaningful budget reform in the next bill? Can we get this federal deficit and this out of control budget under control?
It won't get under control, but it'll be better than what it is. I mean, if you look at the tariffs offsetting some of the deficit spending, it will be better than what it is, but you'll never get what you want. It is built-in harassment. You will see Social Security and Medicare go bankrupt in the next presidency, not this one. You'll see the budget come to a crisis. That's mathematically certain. And we haven't done anything because we're a reactionary government rather than a proactive government. That's the frustrating part of being up here, is because nobody handles things before it's an emergency. And once an emergency, you always come up with a halfway plan, which is not good.
So how does that bear on the midterms? President Trump promised that he was going to get this deficit under control. And frankly, I agree with everything that you've said relative to that. I mean, you do live in a political process. We do have a democracy. Everybody can't get their way on everything. You've got to come to the middle some. But it just seems to me that anybody who's living in America would not want to see the greatest country on earth come to an end because of an economic implosion. And when you got $1 trillion in interest to pay every year, which is the rate that it's at now, and growing, it seems to me that it's something that has got to be dealt with. Can you get reelected without meaningful budget control?
You can't, because you're growing the economy faster than you're growing the debt. You're growing the economy faster than inflation. That's good for people just living every day. That's what they look at first. The debt seems like a back burner issue to them because they don't see the real hurt locker. The president does have the tariffs that's producing a tremendous amount of revenue. We just need to make sure he doesn't spend it on anything else. That goes straight to debt, that he doesn't get caught up in the same thing, to use that as a tool in his toolbox, that it actually goes back to the people's debt so our children don't have to pay that. I also have a bill called the Incentivized Savings Act, which will pass this year. I'm looking for another bill in the Senate from Senator McCormick, hopefully, which I will be with this weekend, planning, which means at the end of the budget year, if you don't spend your money right now, you lose it. somebody else spends it anyways. It's a horrible way of doing business. We all
Mhm.
complain about it. Every
Mhm.
bureaucracy does it. My bill says if you don't spend it instead, whatever you save, 49% rolls over to next year. 49% goes back to debt and deficit, not the president, not the speaker, not higher headquarters, debt and deficit, 2% bonus retention for that department to sweeten the deal. So we reward people for saving rather than punish it. I think it'll be transformative to Congress and the way we spend money in government. And so I'm really looking for an out of the box solution that I think is going to pass this year. Really excited about it.
So let me ask you, Congressman, what's your vision? What's next for Congressman McCormick? I thought you were going to run for the U.S. Senate, frankly, and I would have left sunny Palm Beach and come up there and campaign for you.
Well, you're too kind. We do have some big plans, but I don't want to get ahead of this election. I want to make sure this election is focused on we need to beat Ossoff. He's got a track record to run
Mm.
against for sure. This is a tough year. Midterms, he's well ingrained. We need to be one team, one fight. We have three people fighting in that primary, and it's going to put us at a severe disadvantage for that election. I hope we do better as we learn in Georgia that we are almost 50% minorities. We have to appeal to everybody. We have to make sure that our rhetoric is conservative but appealing. That is super important for the future of Georgia.
Were you surprised when Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned from Congress? That one really blew me away. You know, I met her at Mar-a-Lago in 2018 or maybe 2017. We were both dialing for dollars for President Trump. We sat at the same table for 4 or 5 hours, and I knew then just intuitively that this gal was going places. She has a lot of charisma and a lot of chutzpah, but she worked so hard to get the position, and she was effective in a number of ways. I don't know about legislatively, but she certainly had the bully pulpit at her disposal. It just blew me away when she just kind of got mad and quit.
Well,
Seemed to me
remember,
that way.
once you get at odds with President Trump and he gives you a nickname, it's trouble, especially inside the Republican Party, and especially when you've hitched your train to him. I knew she was in big trouble. And remember, this is the problem with Marjorie. She had the worst performance in Georgia when compared to President Trump. Underperformed Trump by 8 points. You compare that to the best performing district, which was mine, which overproduced by 8 points. This is really important about the message. I vote more conservative than Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's objective truth. So you can have a very conservative legislative record. You can actually get more legislation passed. You can grow the party. You can outperform in politics and still be conservative. You don't have to punch everybody in the face. You can say she's effective. Yeah, effective at becoming famous, but not effective at growing the party, not effective at passing legislation. What's important? Being famous or being effective? That's what we have to really look at when we come to politics. And too many people are addicted to the fame rather than addicted to success. It is time to make this about us rather than me, to grow the party through something that appeals to everybody like Reagan did when he won by 20 points. The Democrats have picked all the wrong fights. This is the time to act. And I think President Trump is being brilliant at this, but I think we can even do better as we move forward.
So, you think she's going to run for president? That's sort of the rumor that's
I
out
don't
there.
think so. I don't think she has a lane to run in. She can't take
Mm.
the Trump lane. She certainly can't take any sort of appealing lane that's going to get her any traction. She may run just for the fame of it, to stay in the news lines, but she's done in politics. You know, it's nothing personal. I've known
You know,
Marjorie for a long time, but this is not her time.
in my life, I've never really been at the top of the class. I've been sort of middle, top third. You're one smart guy. Are the other people in Congress nearly as smart as you are? An MD, an MBA, and a veteran of our armed forces?
Well, I'm doing my homework every day. You know, I got to learn just like you. I'm human, but I put my work in. That's the main thing.
Well, and I, for one, really appreciate it. Rich McCormick, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. I've enjoyed our friendship for many years now. We're not on speed dial, but we have a good congenial relationship, and I value that. Have a great rest of your day.
You got my number, Semper Fi.
We come to you every Saturday and Sunday on John's Radio Network at The Truth with John Gordon. We welcome you to join us. We're on between noon and 2 every Saturday and Sunday. We also live stream, just like we're doing right now, on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter. And if you want to do me a teensy little favor, just subscribe to one of those channels. It helps us so much. And like us if you do, and be sure, if you'd like to share our broadcast. It really helps. It is hard to get established in this space because there's so many dang, we call them YouTubers, podcasters. It is a very competitive field these days. And we'd like to have a bigger megaphone. The only way we can do that is if our listeners, you know, that 98% of our listeners are not subscribed. And if we could just get half those people to hit the subscribe button, it doesn't cost anything, takes less time than it takes for me to explain it. It would magnify our reach so much. And you know, I'm not engaging in shameless self-promotion. I don't do this for glory. I sure don't do it for money. It costs me more than you can imagine to put this on the air every Saturday and Sunday. But I do it because I love this country and I do believe in conservative values. And that's what we talk about. And we welcome you to join us, and we would welcome you to subscribe to us if you would care to. We've got the Georgia Peaches on, and we're going to be talking about the Georgia Senate 18th race that just happened this week and some remarkable results out of that. We've got a governor's race in Georgia, a lieutenant governor's race, a U.S. Senate race, and then there's always that little thorn in our side, Fani Willis, who I love to talk about because I think she is the biggest Fanny, and maybe phony. All those wrapped up in one in the room. We had our John Gordon Truth Dumbass Award for 2025, and Fani Willis was the winner. And she has some stiff competition comprised of Brad Raffensperger, Chris Carr, Kemp. Who else did we nominate for Dumbass of the Year? Oh, Josh Buffoon, who as I affectionately refer to him, probably just made our Georgia Peaches mad with that one. Sorry about that. But I don't like pettiness. I really don't like pettiness. And he is the godfather of pettiness in my view. All right. So with that, let's get to our Georgia Peaches. And now we'll get into it. Welcome, Debbie Dooley, and your cohorts there, Jackie Harding and Celestine James.
Good morning.
Hey, welcome.
Good
And
morning.
Good morning.
got a lot to unpack here. Georgia had just had a state Senate race in my home county of Bibb County, Georgia, for the vacated seat that John Kennedy left to run for lieutenant governor. And some pretty amazing and encouraging results out of that race. Which of you ladies would like to speak to that?
Okay, I can speak to this. I actually had made an endorsement in that race, and that was the gentleman, that McNeil, that's going into a runoff. And I think Josh McCoon, John, we're friends, but Josh McCoon's doing a good job. The Democrats targeted the state Senate race, state Senate District 18, and you had Republicans running, you had one Democrat running, and they thought they were going to flip the seat because of what happened. The Republicans are not good in turning out for special elections. And I know you had a House District Chair, District 8, Chan Jones, was actually working very hard to make sure Republicans turned out to vote because the Democrats had nationalized that election, and they had one Democrat running. There was Congressional District 2, a lot of their chairmen worked. Everybody worked hard. Josh McCoon, the Georgia Republican Party, worked hard to make sure we turned out our vote. And you know what? 63% of the voters in that special election were Republican. They voted for the Republican candidate. So this was bigger than most folks know, because there was a lot of angst that our people wouldn't turn out. They did. Now I think February 17th is where we'll have a runoff between the Democrat and the Republican. And we need our Republican voters to turn back out again. You cannot take anything for granted because Democrats are motivated. They want to give a black eye to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So we've got to outwork them. And that was a big victory. It really was.
So the Republican candidate, let's see here, I've got the results. Got Eric Wilson got 20.25% of the vote, but that doesn't really tell the whole story because, as you point out, Debbie, Republicans aggregated 64% of the vote. So now Wilson faces Lamario Brown, who got 37% of the vote in a runoff. When is the runoff going to be conducted?
February 17th.
February 17th. So, why are Republicans seemingly not as good at just grassroots fundamental politics like getting out the vote as the Democrats are? Where is the disconnect?
Well, I can tell you one disconnect is the fact that Democrats pour money into seats. They pay people to go door to door, and they're doing all that. And a lot of Republicans, a lot of GOP voters that are not active with their party, they, just don't get motivated to turn out for one race. And everybody involved in this race did a great job at turning voters out. And we showed that was still a Republican seat. Now, keep in mind, okay, that election, special election, was just to fill out the term of John Kennedy, who represented that district, who resigned and stepped down to run for lieutenant governor. So there will be another Republican primary. Voters have to go back to the polls, vote February 17th to vote for the Republican in that district. And then they'll have to turn out and vote in May. There's another qualifying to fill out a 2-year term. So, you're going to have, just like in Georgia 14, which Jackie can talk about when I get through running my mouth this morning. But they're going to have to turn around again and show up in May. So you could have some of the Republicans that did not win could turn out and vote again, turn out and run again for a full term. But this is the nature of the beast. But Jackie can give you info on what's going on in Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat.
Well, we just talked to Rich McCormick about that very topic. Jackie, welcome to the show. And you're up
Thank
there
you, John.
in the 14th district. And Marjorie Taylor Greene just kind of surprised and shocked the world, I thought, when she resigned from Congress because she worked so hard to get there. And she walked into battle on so many fronts for the last 4 years. And I always admired her tenacity. And so it was kind of a shocker when she got mad and kind of a riff with the president. I always felt like, okay, they squabbled, they got in a little squabble, but they'll kiss and make up, just like Elon and the president have done. But Marjorie just said, to heck with it, I'm out of here. Kind of left y'all holding the bag, right?
Yeah,
Well,
she's auditioning for The View.
Good luck with that one. Another sinking ship.
I've been interviewed a million times about the feud between Marjorie and Donald Trump, and I likened it to parents who were separated getting a divorce and having faith that their friendship would mend. But you know what? I've grown up, and I've realized that there's more important things to think about. Honestly, I support both of them. I support my president, and I would be happier with Marjorie if she hadn't left before her term was up, because that opens up a whole can of worms that I don't think the normal person fully understands. talking about getting out the vote and getting Republicans to show up, and why aren't Republicans better at showing up? Well, Republicans are in their homes, raising their families, working really hard, making repairs on their cars and their houses, and they're trying to survive, and they're trying to occasionally go on vacation and live a good, healthy life. And it's because of crazy policies. It's because of people resigning that need to finish their term. It's because of so many things that are making Americans, Republicans, have to basically set up residence at their polling locations because you're used to a normal person thinks of elections as when a president gets elected. Let's go vote in November. And oh gosh, we got the midterms. Oh, is it already time to vote 2 years after we voted for our president? That's what normal people think of.
Yep.
And you literally have to be in the GOP. You have to be an active member of your local Republican Party to know that all of these crazy things are happening. And we've got a jungle primary because the way it's set up in Georgia is when special elections occur, you have what's referred to as a jungle primary, and which means anybody, if you're a Republican, independent, libertarian, anybody can be on one ballot. So we have basically on March 10th is the special election date, the magical date to elect someone to fill out the remainder of Marjorie Taylor Greene's term. And we have got 21 people on the ballot. And 17 people on the ballot are Republicans.
So out of those 17, who are identified as the front runners? I would imagine that you've got out of that batch, you got a lot of fringe candidates that are in it for.
I mean,
God
you have a
knows
lot
why.
of you know what? You have a lot of good people, a lot of nice people, thinking they're doing the right thing, stepping up and running for office. I haven't met any of them, and I've been personally interviewing each one. And I'd say the front runners probably. I'd say Colton Moore,
Yeah, I agree.
Clay Fuller, Jim Tully,
Mhm.
a lot of other good people. I don't want to exclude anybody, so I'm sorry if I excluded, but those seem to be the front runners based on local events that we have and straw poll results and that kind of thing. But if you just think about this, and I'm sorry to dominate so much of the time, but if you think about this, the 14th district is so Republican, it's so conservative, and so Christian. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be in Georgia, and we have like 70% of the voters are Republicans. But if you have a 70% pie and it's cut into 17 pieces, and you have a Democrat pie and it's cut into 2, we have a real possibility of having a Democrat be our next congressman. And that is terrifying to me. And so the GOP, no one else but the local parties and our district party, the 14th Congressional District GOP, is doing all of it. We are doing get out the vote campaigns. We're raising money so we can do that. We're hosting forums so that people can come out and get to know these people. So tell you what, if you haven't done this lately and you know a local Republican Party member, thank them for their service, because no one pays our gas or our wear and tear on our cars or the time and treasure that it took away from our families to do this job. But we are working ourselves to death to get people out to the polls for this election, and the runoff is April 7th.
And Reagan Box is a candidate for Georgia 14. She will be joining us shortly.
Yes, she's a good friend.
Good. She's another one. I think she told me she's raised $100,000. And Celestine, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Okay, I sit in the 12th Congressional District, and I am deeply concerned about the state of the Republican Party, not only in the state of Georgia, but the United States. But since let's just talk about Georgia. We lack leadership. We do. And that is my opinion. And I'm talking to a lot of people across the state. We need to have a clearly defined strategy to send down to all of our district chairs as to the direction in which we need to go. And it needs to trickle down to our county chairs. And so I'm seeing an absence of leadership. I am.
And you're speaking on the state level?
I'm looking at the state level. I'm looking at, and I will go ahead and say it, Josh McCoon.
Yeah.
Josh McCoon, we need to see you. We need direction. And it's not for some people, but for all in the Republican Party. There are different factions right now, and it's highly splintered. And so people want to talk about unity, but it begins at the top.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't have a seat at the table in Georgia Republican circles any longer. But I did once upon a time. I was the chairman of the Georgia Republican Foundation, and Billy Lovett was our chairman. And this is in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm not sure when y'all were born. You probably don't know who I'm talking about. But, you know, we did have cohesion. And David Schaefer was actually the executive director of the party then. Not the chairman, but he had a full-time job running the state office. And from what I could tell, everybody was rowing in the same direction, and we raised money. I mean, we raised millions of money. That was really my job as the chairman of the foundation. I don't take any credit. Billy Lovett is the one who went out and pressed the flesh and got people to give. And he brought national figures into Georgia, and we had dinners for them, and we would raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's where the time, the energy, and the focus was. This guy, Josh Buffoon, has spent his time and energy engaging in petty politics and going after people that he doesn't like. Now, that's my perception. You all are free to correct the record if you'd like, and I'm open to receiving information because, like I said, I really am not that close to it today as I was, but you know, I do think I probably represent the more rank and file because I'm not as intimately involved. So it's all perception, and that is the perception that I think that he has given off, and I don't like it. I wish it would change. And to your point,
I do as well. I do as well. When we get to the point and we're a leader, I want you to lead. It is not personal with me. But when we get to the point where we start targeting people and making personal attacks and not standing up and speaking out against injustices in the party, and we allow it to continue because someone is your friend, I have a problem with that.
well, Celestine, I want to get to know you better. You're my new best friend because you and I say it exactly right.
Best friend.
No.
So let's talk about the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race. You got Burt Jones, Chris Do Nothing Carr, Brad Most Secure Election Ever Raffensperger, and Clark Dean. And there are a lot of people evidently that are gunning for Burt Jones because millions of dollars are being spent on negative ads against Burt. I know Burt. I like Burt. He's a friend of mine. But I'm one step removed because I'm down here in sunny Florida. What's going on?
I don't know, but Reagan Box is waiting to come on. She's in Georgia 14.
All right. Well, by all means, bring her in. Reagan, welcome.
It's great to be here.
And you're in Georgia 14, Debbie said? No.
Yes.
Oh, you are. Okay. So we got two people from Georgia 14th. Well, we talked about MTG and the congressional race. So I want to move us along and talk about the governor's race. What do each of you think? How do you make odds? And where's all this, these negative ads coming from attacking Burt?
Well, I can tell you, I did research into that group, that top secret group that's violating Georgia election law because they're running these ads. We don't know who paid for it. I tied their group to two attorneys that had done work for Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush. So that lets you know, and the beneficiary of those ads is Brad Raffensperger. He's got the money to pay for them if he wants to. He is the beneficiary of those ads, and I think it's despicable. I oppose dark money in politics. If someone's running a campaign ad, I want to know who paid for it. I want to know. Voters have a right to know who is paying for that. So I think at some point we need to look really hard on a federal level about these dark money groups. And I think Bert's the front runner, so they're attacking him. Heritage Foundation, not Heritage, I think it's Wall Street Journal just came out against his plan to do away with the state income tax and all that. But Reagan, okay, you're working. Reagan, are you still with us?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know what's going on with the camera. I'm clicking on everything.
Okay, so you want to tell us? I know you have you raised any money? Were you able to raise money?
Yes, ma'am. It's coming in every single day from all over the country.
Good. How much have you raised so far?
Probably including the last quarter of the Senate race, probably right at 50,000.
Okay.
And
I
I'm sorry,
switched over
Reagan is
mid-quarter.
running for what office?
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, for the congressional seat in the.
She's one of the many candidates in Georgia 14. So Reagan can, I mean, I know you have a lot of grassroots support. So can you tell us about why you're running and what you would want to do? What separates you from the other candidates?
I really know the issues and I genuinely care. Like, I love people. I don't have to know you to love you, but I'm going to fight for you because I'm tired of watching the people in this country suffer, and especially the people of the 14th. I was born and raised here, and most people in the 14th don't have a lot of money. They're struggling to pay bills, and I'm watching poor policy just affect them on every level of their life, and people deserve better. And that's why I'm running. My three main issues are healthcare, affordability, and availability, public safety, and affordability overall, because 37% of Americans now are pushed into welfare, and we're pushing people out of middle class.
And that sounds good. John, you have questions for Reagan?
Well, I wanted to. We've covered the 14th pretty thoroughly. I'm happy to spend as much time as you'd like, but I really kind of want to get to this governor's race. And you were saying Brad Raffensperger may be tied to the dark money, potentially without evidence, but that's a suspicion, which is okay. But my question is, why is Brad Raffensperger anywhere still relevant in Georgia politics today? He went on 60 Minutes and said it was the most secure election in the state's history. And now we know that there were 170 ballot tapes that came out of Fulton County that were not signed and certified according to state law, yet he certified the ballots anyway. And, my work on the with the Shealy folks and on the Jeffords and Satir case against Fulton Board of Elections, I've seen the evidence. We know that 2020 was stolen, and I campaigned for Attorney General all over the state, delivering the evidence of why it was. We know that it was stolen. Yet Raffensperger, running against Jody Heiss, David Belle Sheriff TJ, claimed to have gotten 52% of the vote and won without a runoff. I met one kid at the University of Georgia and over 10,000 Georgians that I met who said anything nice about Brad Raffensperger. What the heck? Somebody help me understand.
Well, number one, I think you mispronounced his name. His last name is what he is. Rattenberger. Brad Rattensberger. Because he's a big rat. He is the Democrats' preferred candidate in the Republican primary. So, you know, Brad Raffensperger, he's arrogant, he's egotistical. And I can tell you something else. If he's the nominee, he will lose, because there's a lot of Republican voters that will not vote for him for governor. But I think Burt Jones is going to win. I think Brad Rattensperger will go down in flames like he deserves to do. And, you know, I just, you know, I think it's good that we're going to go after him, Rattensperger. That's his
Celestine, what do you hear from over there in Augusta? Where are people lining up?
Well, you know, I will say this about the 12th, and I want them to hear me loud and clear. They seem to have a problem understanding what it means to be a Republican in the 12th House. And so we have a lot of work to do. But there's a lot of support right now for Burt Jones. He is the front runner, and just a groundswell of support. So this is his to win, unless something else comes up down the road to where you know, there's some irregularities. But right now, he is the front runner.
I agree. I don't even literally let myself think about that race. Obviously, I'm hyper focused on the 14th district congressional special election, but the governor's race, I mean, I see it as, it's definitely Burt Jones's to win.
And then we have the Georgia Senate race to replace John Ossoff. Garrett Dooley, the governor's favorite.
Hey, if I could interrupt,
Yeah.
Speaking of the Senate race, so your guest, Reagan Boggs. Hey, Reagan, I saw her last night at our Walker County Republican Party meet and greet with the congressional members, or candidates rather. She actually started her political career running for the U.S. Senate. And so when Marjorie resigned, she stepped into the congressional race. So I think that would be something to, you know, worth asking Reagan about, because I'd love to hear more about that and how that went. What made her decide that? Reagan, if you can hear me.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Loud and
Okay.
clear.
I don't know what's going on with the camera, and I'm sorry about that. But anyways, I originally wanted Marjorie's seat, and at the time she was doing good. No one could ever foresee what was going on with her and Trump and her resigning like she did. And I'd actually got a phone call that the day before she resigned that Trump was already vetting me. Trump and his team were vetting me to primary Marjorie. So it just seemed like a logical crossover.
Well, what do you suppose is driving Marjorie Taylor Greene? Does she have an act too?
Well, my personal opinion is she was wanting Trump to endorse her for either Senate or governor. He sent her the internal polling and it wasn't there. And he said, I can't endorse you for this. And she got mad and just kept retaliating.
Yeah, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and that's what we're seeing now with that. But again, hey, Marjorie will end up on The View or some other liberal harpy show because they like it, because she's attacking Republicans.
Do y'all think she's going to run? Do you think she's going to run?
I think she's going to run for governor. I really do think she's going to run for governor, me personally.
She'll lose bigly.
I know she'll lose, but that's why she's going on The View and CNN to make herself look more moderate and broaden her base.
So, Reagan, you were running for the U.S. Senate at one point. You switched to the congressional race. Is that what I understand?
Yes, sir. I've already went to 140 counties, probably put 140,000 miles on my two vehicles, and just been traveling the state the last nearly 3 years.
So what do you make of the remaining field? Garrett Dooley, Mike Collins, and Buddy Carter.
they all have massive holes, and I'm really afraid of all that. I don't think a Republican's going to win this race.
I did have a Republican who I know and respect tell me that Ossoff has done a very good job of
Yep.
constituent services. And I think that, you know, when it gets down to the pulling the lever, people are going to say, well, what have you done for me? What have you done for me lately? And maybe that does favor Ossoff. It pains me to say that. There is nothing about him I like. He is an empty suit if I've ever seen one, but he is the incumbent. And as I found out the hard way, $1 million and 4 months of my life later, that eye is a very powerful thing when people walk into the booth.
Well,
Mike Collins,
I-
Mike
I-
Collins
agree
is
with that.
winning by. Go ahead, Celestine.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, John Ossoff is one of the candidates. He's never stopped campaigning. He's never stopped. And his people, they are Johnny on the spot. I spoke with a veteran this morning, and she's one of those people. She is Republican, but she said, he worked for me. When I went to my Republican representative, he did not help me with my issues, but she went to John Ossoff, and they went above and beyond in order to make sure that this veteran's situation was resolved. And so she says, I'm going to vote for John Ossoff. Now, she's Republican, but this man stays on military bases. He has his people. They're even going into Republican meetings.
Yep.
John Ossoff has his people going into Republican meetings, and they're being welcomed. This to me is just wow. And so when I look at our candidates right now, we don't have a Republican right now, still today, that can beat John Ossoff. He's still the candidate.
And I think the best candidate, you have Buddy Carter, has got a lot of baggage the Democrats can run against. You have Mike Collins, has got tremendous baggage that he will get trounced in November. But then you have Derek Dooley, who doesn't have a record. And so he doesn't have, there's nothing about him that Democrats, that the Ossoff camp can pick apart. Derek Dooley's part of the Kemp machine, and he has not spent. He has been focusing on raising money. They've got leadership in 159 counties, and then you have Buddy Carter and Mike Collins that have already started running campaign ads out there. Derek Dooley has not run any ads. He's been focused on raising money, getting support in the counties. So he doesn't have a record like Collins and Buddy Carter have that John Ossoff and the Democrats can pick apart and run ads after ad after ad against them. So I think Derek Dooley is the best choice. And you can watch when he starts running ads, when independent expenditure ads are run against Mike Collins and Buddy Carter. You're going to see a fighter that's out there ready to fight.
Well, he's certainly got a great name to run for political
Dooley,
office in
I'm not
Georgia.
related to him, but
But you like his last name, and so do I because I'm a big Georgia fan. All right, so we know that Kemp wants Dooley because he single-handedly anointed him as the front runner in the Senate race. Who does Kemp want in the governor's race? Who would be his favorite?
I don't think he's made a decision. I think the race Governor Kemp's pushing is the Senate race. So I don't expect, I mean, that doesn't mean he won't do it, but I don't expect Governor Kemp to endorse in the governor's race. I think Burt Jones has done a good job. And if I were to handicap it, he is the one to beat, because there's a lot of pushback against Brad Rattensperger by conservative grassroots, and you'll have a lot of the grassroots that will not vote for him if he is the GOP nominee, because there's a lot of bad blood that you can't go back, go back on.
So I've always wondered about the relationship between Kemp, Raffensperger, and Carr. Seems like Carr is Kemp's puppet, from my perception. Raffensperger, though, is very different. He doesn't seem to be aligned so much with Kemp, but then again, I don't really know. How about you, other peaches? What do you think? Celestine, Reagan, Jackie, how do you make book?
How do I make what?
How do you make book on the governor's race and where Kemp's allegiance would be?
Who do you think will win?
I think it'd be Bert. I really do think it'll be Bert. Like I said, I have a gut feeling Marjorie's going to try to jump in just to get at Trump for endorsing him. But hopefully Bert wins. I'd hate to see Raffensperger as our nominee.
Everybody would except Raffensperger's minions.
Jackie, do you have a perspective on this?
As I said before, I don't even think of anybody else as being in the race. I know that sounds crazy, but I mean it's Bert's to lose.
I agree.
I just don't. My brain only has so much. I'm thinking about the special election, must win special election, and
Right.
but I do believe it's Bert's to win. I mean, I haven't really. That's like the one race that I don't feel like I have to work 24/7 to create a miracle, to accomplish. I think I feel good about that race.
Well, we got the Georgia legislature starting in just a few days, and Burt Jones will be presiding over the Senate in there, so he'll have plenty of opportunity to get exposure as presiding officer of the Senate. What can we look forward to in this session of the Georgia legislature?
I think you're going to see a lot of maybe legislation passed to kind of stop what your favorite person is, Fannie Willis, what she does, some of the ridiculous things that she does. John, with Fannie Willis and her boy toy, Nathan Wade. So she was forced to testify, is being forced to testify before a Senate committee. And, a lot of that was Burt Jones doing. He has gone after her. She targeted him. And so things are going to be interesting about she's, having to pay now. Her office is responsible for having to pay the alternate electors attorney's fees and legal fees and all of that. John, you know a lot about Fannie. You've been on front lines going after her forever.
Well, I really have not gone after her. I've just let the facts lead me.
Right. I mean, you have really been critical of her.
I have been
Like
very
everybody.
critical of her, but not because I've never met the lady. I know nothing about her other than her public persona. I think she's arrogant. I think she's rude. And I think she disrespects the rule of law. She cast aspersions against every member of the Georgia bar, including myself, because lawyers already have a bad enough name. And here she is out traveling the globe on the taxpayer dollar through her boy, Nathan Wade. You call him her boy toy. But they made no secret of the fact that they traveled together to exotic places, and she was paying him exorbitantly through her office. So I think it is a fair inference to conclude that there was impropriety with taxpayer money. Now, Judge McAfee, who used to be her boss or used to work for Fannie Willis, refused to hold her accountable and instead gave them the opportunity to go to the Court of Appeals. In other words, oh, this potato's too hot for me. Here, you take it. I'm not courageous enough to do my job. But he's the one who's going to have to rule on whether the conduct of Fannie Willis did raise to the level of a violation of her duties as district attorney, whether it was unethical conduct. Now, the Court of Appeals found that she gave the appearance of impropriety. Some people are saying that's not impropriety, it's just the appearance, and the bar rules say that you have to violate a tenet of the bar rules, of which the appearance of impropriety is one of them. So I don't know why that wouldn't be improper conduct. What do you all hear?
I think the Georgia bar protects their own. I don't see them doing anything about her conduct. And just keep in mind, she had her butt handed to her in that young thug YSL case. It did not all turn out like she wanted to because she was so focused on a politically motivated witch hunt going after Donald Trump, going after the Republican electors. And I remember this is the hypocrisy of the Democrats. Van Jones is a commentator for CNN. And not long, a few days after the election or the day of the 2020 presidential election, that showed Donald Trump may end up winning till all the little votes came in. Van Jones wrote an op-ed saying that Pennsylvania should seat a slate of alternate electors so they could be prepared in case the election was overturned. Not one thing
Yeah.
was done about Van Jones doing that. They just go after the Republicans. So the hypocrisy is on full display in regard to that.
Well, Rob Pitts said that, make no mistake, the taxpayers of Fulton County will be the ones to pay the Trump and his 13 co-defendants if there is a finding that Fani Willis's office has to repay them their legal fees. Does that strike you as pretty arrogant? And I don't know. It just really hit me the wrong way.
It seems to be that there's a lot of rules for thee and not for me, and rules for thee and not for me. And as long as these people keep protecting Fani Willis, that is because you have a lot of Republicans who are in bed with her, who hate Donald Trump. So as long as we have this dynamic, it will continue. She will continue to thumb her nose. Fani Willis will continue to thumb her nose at the legal system and do whatever she doggone wants to do. So until such time we acknowledge that this is so, and we put in place some changes and we hold people accountable, it will continue.
Yeah.
And we'll be sitting right here still talking about it. And this lady will probably still be in her office. And it's just like nothing changes. Accountability is not just a word that we need to toss out. We need to see some actions. We need to see people being dealt with legally. What are the repercussions of this? Because we know that Fani Willis, should be removed. She should still not be in office. So, but she is being protected. Those are facts.
We are a nation of inaccountability. I mean, look at Pam Bondi. We've seen nothing from any of that. We've seen no arrest or nothing moving forward.
Well, that's a huge disappointment because Kash Patel promised us transparency. He promised that he was going to tell us the truth. And I share your concern. I don't think we've gotten the truth. A la Epstein, it's a cover up. There's been no accountability. And, that I think the American people voted for Trump because he promised us accountability and transparency. But I think, I'm still optimistic, actually. I think Trump is going about it in a very strategic, methodical way. And we've talked on The Truth virtually every Saturday about how he is systematically deconstructing the deep state. But rather than going in and confronting it head on, he is doing it very cleverly.
Yes.
Tulsi Gabbard exposed Russia, Russia, Russia. Now,
Mhm.
I think the 2020 election, the facts are going to come out, and we'll
Yes.
find out that not Georgia was not the only swing state that had the election stolen from him.
Well,
And
I mean, Trump's also saying there's no Epstein list. How did Maxwell and Epstein get put in jail if there's no Epstein list?
well, I look, I'm totally on board with you on that. I'm personally, I'm not as concerned about the list. What I
Mhm.
want to know is who put Epstein in business. I mean, we've got the U.S. attorney from the Southern District of Florida who said he was told to go light on Epstein because he was part of intelligence. I think that tells us everything. I want to know, what role did our own federal government play, or Mossad, or what do they call the British intelligence? M4, M2, what is it, Anthony? MI6. There you go.
MI6.
Well, what role did each of them, or any of them, or did all of them play a role in Epstein's enterprise? That's the information I want. And I'm
Me too.
probably not
Me
the
too.
in the majority of that, because I think there are a lot of voyeurs who want to see that list. My concern about the list, I'm sure that a list exists, but my concern is that you have the potential of dragging innocent people and ruining their lives and reputations by publishing a list when maybe they just flew on his plane or saw him socially and had nothing to do with the torrid activity. That's my hang up on the list. All right. Well, Reagan, we invited you on here. I'll let you have the last word. Tell us, what's your background? Why are you running for Congress? And anything that you would like to say on the way out this morning.
I've had a strange background. After high school, I went to college for 5 years. I studied art and history in Paris, France. I was a runway model, shark and sea turtle research in the Florida Keys, mission work in Costa Rica. Then I moved out west, learned how to break, train, and show cutting horses on a national level. Ended up being women's ranch rodeo reserve world champion, U.S. cutting horse reserve world champion. I trained horses for Rex Tillerson while he was Trump's first Secretary of State back in 2016. And I'm here because I see the issues, I see the corruption, and I want to get this fixed. I love my country, I love the people of Georgia, and I just want to do what's right. My grandfather was the youngest person ever signed on to the FBI, and he always ingrained it in me. You do what's right no matter what the cost. And I think that is what our government needs right now. We need people that will stand up with that strength and conviction and just say, no more, no more.
So, Jackie, you got 17 Republicans running in that district. You're concerned that they will dilute each other's support, and that maybe this flagrantly red seat would end up in blue hands. That could be a disaster. Is the special election a free for all, or does everyone win and the last person standing uh,
Jackie?
get the election? But somebody's got to win by 50% plus one, right? So
Right.
we're
That's
probably
that's
headed to a
probably
runoff.
yeah. So with 21 candidates on the ballot, I would love to take a bet if someone would take it. I guarantee you there's going to be a runoff
Yeah.
on April 7th. So
Yeah.
someone take that bet.
Yes.
I want to make some money here.
No.
So
And then
so
they
the
have to turn around and run again for the
yes,
full term.
Right. Yeah.
yes, they have to. In fact, before the special election on March 10th, they're going to have to qualify for the primary for, so it's like they have to turn around. It's crazy. It's a lot of craziness, but I will tell you, the GOP volunteers, boots on the ground, are working really hard. We're working really hard. We're going to actually, the 14th district Republican Party is putting on 3 candidate forums, the first of which is January 31st. And we're going to invite all the candidates, all the Republican candidates. Of course, we're not crazy. And we're going to give them a chance to let people, hear from them. And at the end of that forum, we're going to have a straw poll, and whoever gets the top 8 candidates who win that, who get the top amount of the straw poll, will be going to the next one, which will be February 12th in Dalton. And then whoever wins that one, the top 3 are going to do a forum in Walker County. So I invite everybody to follow the 14th District GOP of Georgia on our Facebook page, and to get all the dates. We're keeping it super factual and informative, and talking about the chairman and things like that. I can tell you that Josh supporters and David Cross supporters and everybody, we are all working together in the 14th district to make sure Republican stays in this seat. So I think all I'm seeing is people locking arms and working together, and I'm proud to be leading them.
Well, I think if anybody can manage that complexity, it might just well be you, Jackie. So you keep fighting, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
I get the political reality of 17 Republican candidates, but for me, the more participation, the better. I am so excited to see people like Reagan Box running. And I'm also happy that Colton Moore, who I think is Marjorie Taylor Greene in a man's body, he's fearless, and he's really taken on the power structure. I admire that. And Reagan, you're out there fighting the good fight too. So I hope I wish you all well. And thank you, Peaches, for letting me be a part of the program today.
You did great.
Well, I had a great time with you lovely ladies, and you're patriots, and we don't always agree on everything, but we do agree on loving the flag in this country.
Yes.
And that's what it's all about. So keep
John,
up the
why
good
don't
work.
you announce, in closing, why don't you announce when your show normally is and how they can view it?
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. I'm never ashamed to engage in shameless self-promotion. Every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We also are on cdm.press, and you can watch us on social media on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter. Just hit the live button and look for John Gordon Truth. And if you love me or hate me, you can write me at johngordontruth@gmail.com, and all of our past episodes are on johngordon.tv. That's our time for now. Our next guest is Martin Seif. He asked me how long we were going to spend in the interview today, and I said 20 or 30 minutes. And then I realized that after I read his resume, that there will be no time left for the interview. He's worked for just about every newspaper and news service from around the globe that you could think of. Has had a great career in journalism, and he is also the author of quite a few books titled Politically Incorrect Guide to the Middle East, That Should Still Be Us, How Thomas Friedman's Flat World Myths are keeping. There's something at the end of that, Martin, that I don't see.
Flatten our backs.
Keeping us flat on our backs. And the great cycles of American history. And that's what we're here to talk about today. He also has Gathering Storm, the Seventh Era of American History. So I've only known Martin a brief time, but I can already tell you he's one smart cookie. Martin, welcome to the truth.
Thank you, John. Takes one, I hope, to know one. You certainly are.
So thank you. You say that history continues to repeat. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Well, yes and no. There are patterns in history. I'm with Mark Twain. Mark Twain says history never repeats itself exactly, but there are themes in history. Twain, being Twain, puts it much better than I ever could, of course. But in cycles of change, I trace 6 eras of American history. And I maintain that each era has a curve to it. They're all very different from each other, but they all start in reaction to huge crises and challenges in America, in society, and in the economy and in national security. And they deal with those societies, those problems amazingly well. But then there's a new orthodoxy of ideas, and after 40 or 50 years, they become out of date. So they can't deal with new challenges that come along. Things get worse, and eventually we have another cyclic crisis. Now, I'm not a Marxist. I despise Marxism. And I'm not a determinist either. But I do list these eras, and I can even very briefly start off by saying what the eras have been so far. First, we had the era of Thomas Jefferson, an era when America was expanding westward across the continent. An era of high ideals, but also of the expansion of slavery. That was the downside of it. But it was run by elitists, by the elitist Southern planters. Then you had the era of popular democracy, an explosion of extraordinary energy, the era of Andrew Jackson from 1828 through to the beginning of the Civil War. And again, an enormous growth in population and technology and prosperity. But also, we enslaved far more people. We took lands from Mexico. Then it led to the crisis of the Civil War, which was the greatest catastrophe so far in our history. Then you have an era of extraordinary growth again, but a totally different America. The era of Abraham Lincoln and General Grant, a very underestimated president. The era of industrial America, when America becomes the greatest industrial society and the most prosperous society, though there are huge extremes of difference between rich and poor, that the world has ever seen. And then after that, you have a kinder, gentler version of the same in the progressive era, which is the era of William McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt, which again is an era of high ideals. And it's an era where there are very sincere and very underestimated today efforts to make society gentler and more tolerant and improve it. And they work to a certain degree. But then you have the great crisis of the Great Depression, which is a huge crisis. And this results in the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt and our victory in World War II. And what you have from this again is an upscale period and a downscale period. At first, FDR's policies and philosophies seem to sweep all before them, and America becomes very prosperous. There are also negative energies unleashed, and these become clear under Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. We have collectivism that is out of control. We have the catastrophes of welfarism that destroy both working class white and Black and Hispanic community families and social structures, and lead to a huge increase in crime. We have an out of control imperialism that at first after World War II is very benign. It saves the world from Nazism. It saves the world from Japanese fascism. It saves the world, protects the world from the huge evils of communism, which threaten everybody. But then we bungle it in Vietnam, things get sour, and we have a new period of crisis in the late 60s and 70s, and President Reagan rescues us from that. And under President Reagan and the first President Bush, and to some degree under President Clinton too, we sweep all before us again. It's a great era of triumphalism in American history. Everything seems to be going very well. But then it goes sour over the past 20 years. We don't protect our industry. We don't protect our society. We have open borders far too much. We have the destruction of industrial America, which is the source of our prosperity throughout our history. We have a denial of policies of tariffs. And I'm a great supporter of President Trump. And I very much support President Trump's MAGA agenda. And I would maintain that in the face of all the propaganda thrown against him, the real reason the president is hated is not because he's an unscrupulous demagogue with no principles and no consistency, but it's precisely the opposite, that he has been consistent to his principles and his goals in both his first and second administrations. And this is why his enemies hate him so much. Not because the MAGA agenda is false, but because it is real and because he is achieving it.
Well, it seems to me on that subject that the Democrats are against anything that Trump is for, even if it's in Americans' best interest.
Yes, I agree.
And to me, that is just the epitome of selfishness. They seem motivated by their own political power and lust for the same.
I agree completely.
So there is an awful lot to unpack in what you said. Let's focus right now on the elitist. Richard Nixon complained about the elitist, the Northeasterners, the establishment, who thought they were the smartest people in the room, and they were a thorn in his side. And I think today we're watching the elitist as they gather in Davos, Switzerland, as we speak. You worry about those global elitists that are in Davos? A lot of people seem to.
Yes, completely. And I know it very well because when I was with the Washington, you mentioned I worked, if not for everybody, at least for some
Yeah,
major outfits.
you
And I have.
obviously you couldn't keep a job. You worked for the Washington Times, the
Well, for
UPI.
13 years, I kept a job, and then I moved elsewhere, and I was with a
Well,
tech.
now you know I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but you've just had a
Yeah,
wonderful career in journalism, and you've been nominated for 3 Pulitzer Prizes. That's a lot more I can boast of, I'll tell you.
well, I have friends who've won it or been up for more, so one should know one's place. But you bring up Davos,
Yes.
and the Washington Times and UPI, United Press International, who I went to after them, both sent me to Davos. So I covered the Davos meetings over several years. I loved doing it. The only problem was it often clashed with the Super Bowl. So in those years I was watching the Super Bowl at parties, which was great. But it was in hotels or American gatherings at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I still had to be up to cover other things at 7 the next day. Of course, I was a bit younger then, so it was easier.
Right.
But Davos was great because it's a skiing resort. It's quite small. It's not easy to get to, which of course adds to the security aspect. And in the media, of course, we weren't privy to what was really going on, but we were there, and there was lots of free food, and there was even better, there was lots of free drink. So everybody had a great time, and you could ski a bit too, provided you weren't too pie-eyed while you were doing it, while you were going down the slopes. So I loved covering Davos. But the sense you had there was exactly what you said. It wasn't. No doubt there were millions of secret deals being reached, but to me, the revealing thing was what I could see with my own eyes, which was people had these very simplistic views of the world. No borders. Free trade is wonderful. You mustn't protect your own trade anywhere. You must always sacrifice your own people and your own industry interests. It's much more important to have good strategic relations with China or South Korea or any country in Europe, rather than protect the standard of living and welfare and hopes of 300 million Americans at home who do not go to Davos. This doesn't matter. You can serve up all these people because free trade is always going to raise everybody's standard of living. Now, it's not. I have 2 degrees in history, modern history, which means over the past 500 years from the University of Oxford in Britain, at a time when it was still a great university. Hopefully it still is, I think. But I can stand on one foot and in 5 minutes demolish all of Thomas Friedman's theories of free trade. They're all lies. They are not based on fact. Every society in history that has become dominant and prosperous, us, the Chinese today, the British before us, France from the 16th to the 19th centuries have always been based not on free trade, but on the opposite of free trade. The rise of Germany from being a joke for hundreds of years to being the most powerful and successful industrial nation in Europe in the 19th century was based on the Zollverein, the German customs union. The rise of industrial America comes from the 2 great tariff laws of 1862 and 1864 that President Abraham Lincoln pushes through. And the demolition, the destruction of American industry and of American prosperity and of the American working class and of the American middle class now all comes as a direct result of free trade, starting from the Kennedy round, which is misnamed. It was actually pushed through by both Lyndon Johnson and Nixon. President Kennedy theoretically signed on to it, but made none of the catastrophic concessions that followed. And the worst decision of all, of course, was Bill Clinton's decision to let China join the World Trade Organization, which wasn't even wrong in itself, but he refused to protect American domestic industries. I do not demonize China, nor does President Trump. The Chinese rightly and morally look after the interests of their own people, 1.3 billion people, and their standard of living. It was President George W. Bush and Barack Obama very much, and most of all Joe Biden, and of course the genius Bill Clinton himself. They were the people who sold the pass because they were ignorant of economics.
Well, you really well. So a couple of things. One, Bob Lighthizer, who was in Trump 1.0 and worked for the Commerce Department under Wilbur Ross, just penned a book not too long ago called "No Trade is Free."
He's right,
and he is a free market believer. But he just said that, on the subject of tariffs, if we're not at parity with tariffs, and somebody's got their hand in our wallet, and that's just fundamentally wrong. And on China, Richard Nixon really opened the door to China, extending an invitation to our markets and allowing us to enter their markets. And it sounded, and I thought it was a really good thing then, and I still think it's probably a good thing now,
yes.
Except they have taken full advantage. Too much of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. Too
Yes.
many of our computer chips are made in China, and they're not satisfied with that. So now they want to move on Taiwan, where 90% of our computer chips are actually manufactured. And they float spy balloons over our country. They flooded us with fentanyl. I ran for office in Georgia in 2022. Yeah, 2022. And there wasn't a campaign stop that I made that someone didn't come up to me and say that they had lost a friend, son
Yes.
or daughter or loved one to fentanyl. And so someone, when I was talking about spy balloons, said, well, you don't think we're doing that to them? And I'm like, well, let's put that aside. I know we all spy on each other. They spy on us, we spy on them.
Sure.
No question. But the fact that Biden permitted it,
Yes.
that's where my
Yes.
objection was, number one. And number two, I think fentanyl is not the same as a spy balloon. They were seemingly trying to weaken America and really impact us in a very negative way. And I highly resent that. That's not strong enough verbiage, frankly.
Yes, I fully agree. A central in any human system, and this is central to the problem of AIDS, of course, is the human immune system and the breakdown of the human immune system. Countries, nations, societies are like this too. We have to have immune systems, and we have to have protection against being weakened and being infected. A key part of this is having strong border controls. We had the most massive peaceful human migration in human history populated the United States from after the Civil War through to the 1920s. And we had scores of millions of people coming in. But there were also very strong controls on this. Now, they couldn't be foolproof. Organized crime came in, not just with the Italian people, but with every single group. It came in with the Irish when we came in the 1840s. There were Jewish prostitution gangs, basically based in both Central Europe and Buenos Aires, but also got footholds in New York in the 1880s as well. Basically, every group that comes, there will be negative elements, but overwhelmingly, the impact of mass immigration is usually, and certainly in our history, enormously beneficial. But you've got to regulate it, and it's got to be legal, and you've got to control it. President Trump has always been clear about this. He's never opposed immigration into the United States. He wants for the federal government to retain control of immigration that liberals and Democrats have deliberately scrapped since the Edward Kennedy's catastrophic opening of the floodgates back in the 1960s. And you have to have legal immigration. You have to have law-abiding control of immigration. What's the result been? It's been that the Mexican cartels, which are an even bigger threat to the people of Mexico than they are to the people of the United States, have become one of the, not just the most powerful criminal elements on the planet, they've become major world powers, more powerful than most European governments. Arguably, only France and, at least until recently, Britain had viable national governments, which of course are now being undermined under the one world system and under the EU system as well. So things are getting worse and worse.
They've had a huge problem of immigration too.
Yes,
It
exactly.
feels almost coordinated and intentional. If you
Yes,
zoom out and look at the globe, you can see the same patterns playing out. So it makes you wonder who's behind it and what is going on. But if you look just at the United States and the Biden administration, and the Democrats going back to Clinton talked about our southern border and how it needed to be dealt with. And so Trump comes and deals with it. And then the Democrats decide it's such a bad idea.
exactly.
Then you look at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York, which is just one example where immigrants were housed, clothed, fed, given an Obama phone, a daily stipend, and a motor scooter to tour around New York City on. My God, have we lost our minds? And so it's not about benevolence. It's not about charity. It's about power. And the Democrats have engaged in this operation, in my view, to allow immigrants to come into the country, irrespective of whether they are bad people, whether they've committed felonies in their own countries. President Trump says that they've released their mental institutions and their jails and sent those
He's
people to the
correct.
United States. And it's demonic to think that somebody could be so selfish and so unconcerned about the future of our country and only singularly concerned about their power that they would allow this condition to have occurred. And President Trump has stopped it with, I might hasten to add, no new laws passed by Congress.
Exactly.
It's
If I may,
Yes, please.
I agree with you 100%, John, all the way. Right on, man.
So now we've got Somalis in Minnesota.
Indeed, we do.
The fraud is estimated at between 10 and 30 billion dollars, and they were wiring the money back to Somalia. The federal treasury got wind of it and shut that down. So now they're carrying the money out in suitcases by $1 million at a time. The only problem is they don't have enough suitcases, enough couriers to take it all back. I mean, it is one of the most egregious things I've ever seen in my 72 and a half years on this earth.
I completely agree with you all the way. And I'm of the same generation as you are. I even
God love
have
you.
an aching. I look a lot older.
No,
I think I'm only
au
a couple of
contraire.
years. But I agree with you completely. And for me, there's an extra twist to this because when I came to America 45 years ago, and it was the Reagan era, it was a joy for me to come. It wasn't that our country was perfect. No country is ever perfect. But Mrs. Thatcher was heroically rolling back 40 years of out of control socialism and liberal permissiveness in Britain at the time. Nobody in America today realizes, most people in Britain don't realize how bad things became in Britain in the 1970s before Mrs. Thatcher took over. You had 25% yearly inflation that was projected to reach 50% inflation within 2 years. You had the routine assassination, usually in bombings, but also in shootings, of prominent conservative national leaders in the country. You had the collapse of industries that had been the wonder of the world for 200 years, and there seemed to be no end in sight to the spiral. And it wasn't easier for her to turn things around, but she did. And of course, she couldn't succeed all the way. Nobody ever does. But of course, the forces that caused this, the ideas that caused this, and the educational system that kept churning out people who swallowed the most disastrous anti-industrial and anti-national and anti-patriotic policies became worse than ever. And so things are going down the tube again. And they have one of the worst and incompetent and disastrous governments in their history today.
Well, and couple that with the EU, and I think you could apply the same statements to them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I just don't know. President Trump was in Davos earlier this week, and he was very combative with the people that were in attendance there and very accusatory of the EU for allowing open borders. And, the thing that um, just baffles my mind, Trump calls it, what does he call it? The Green New Scam or something like that. And, I've been watching news reports from Davos. They're still pushing this climate agenda.
Yes.
Even though Bill Gates has said that emphasis on that is misguided. What is the deal with climate change, and why are these people fanatical about it when we have demonstrated scientifically that we're probably not? Well, they even acknowledge that it's not global warming because they dropped the nomenclature and turned it into climate change. And there are people there openly and consciously discussing causing climate change by leaving these contrails and making artificial rain and all sorts of stuff like that in an attempt to cool the earth, they say. Well, I just think I'm an innovator. I'm an early adapter. I love technology. I actually relish change when it's to help enhance our quality of life. But I think when it transcends into playing God, that you're on very dangerous ground, number one. And number two, the allocation of resources is just absurd when you consider the things that they could be doing with that money, especially in the EU. And Donald Trump said it's not going to happen in the United States. We're just not going to sign up to it. And I so applaud him for that.
Again, I couldn't agree with you more. And the Irish, we are, of course, very charming, but also very pushy. Have me back for a show just on this, because your difficulty will be getting me to stop. I agree with you 100%. The demand on global warming is not scientific. Even if global warming happens, and there are times it does and there are times it doesn't, but it is not caused, none of it is caused by human greenhouse gases. There is absolutely no hard evidence for this whatsoever. None, zero.
Yet 90% of the scientists in the world were signing on to it.
Because they are real scientists, because they're mass produced. They're mass-produced liberals who are narrow technicians in their own field. One can talk about this for many hours. There are ice caps on Mars that are never discussed, and they have been shrinking to some degree, and then they grow somewhat again. But the point is, climate change happens on Mars, both positively and negatively, getting hot, getting colder at different times. How can that be? If the climate is constant everywhere, if the sun is constant everywhere, how can that be if it's all caused by us evil human beings in our industry? No, the whole climate change myth is a religious fanaticism. It is not a scientific fanaticism. And we know from the Middle Ages and all of human history that irrational fanaticism, just look at Nazism, just look at communism, just look at Islamic fundamentalism. The terror of an out-of-control world is one of these. Carl Sagan, the great false prophet of climate change, who had previously championed the opposite. He said the great danger was world cooling from if we had nuclear war, which might happen if, God forbid, there was nuclear war. But then he goes 180 degrees around and he says, no, we're going to become a hellhole world like Venus. And there's no... everything his theory came, he was a fake scientist and a lousy one. And the media loved him because his idea of a runaway greenhouse effect is contrary to the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most fundamental laws of physics. It's also contrary to what real science needs to be based on evidence, on documented evidence. Their evidence is all repeatedly faked and has been exposed to have been so, as you know so well. But what has it produced? Because they brainwash the young, through the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxism, we have all of Western Europe, all of America and Canada, all of the West. Generations of children are brought up to regard industry as evil. It's another enormous lie. I like to watch classic TV shows like Murder, She Wrote from the 1980s. Even back then, you find even Hollywood is pushing out the idea of noble, per native noble peoples, the Native American peoples of American Canada and the Eskimos want to defend the polar bears. They want to defend the flying thrushes. It's all the evil oil companies and energy companies coming in that are destroying the environment. Steven Seagal even made movies about this. So did Michael Caine. Thriller movies, popular, successful movies. But the truth is the opposite. If you go up to Canada, if you go up to travel widely in Alaska, as I have done, you find people are the opposite. The native peoples across our hemisphere and across the world want investment. They want oil companies to come in. They want energy companies to come in. If they can't get, they prefer American ones. If they can't get American ones, they'll settle for Chinese ones. But they would like to have American ones because it raises the standard of living. It feeds their children. It prevents their children starving. It builds them hospitals. It builds them homes. It builds them schools. And polar bears they regard as a menace that eat people, and they are right. This romanticization of nature comes from people who have never been in nature, people who live in nature, whether it is real frontiersmen across all of traditional America, the American heartland, or you are down in Florida, or across Canada, or up in Alaska. All of these people look for internal free markets. They look for industry. They look for rising levels of prosperity. By contrast, look at Britain. Britain is now a deindustrialized nation as it has not been in at least 400 years. There are there are only a handful of oil refineries left operating in Britain. There are no steel mills. There are no steel refinery works left in Britain. Where the Industrial Revolution began, the Greens have done something that the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Bomber Command could not do in World War II. That the Soviets failed to do in the Cold War, that the British Empire failed to do in World War I. They have deindustrialized Germany. The German people are in the same state as the British people are because of this madness that is driving everybody to destitution and ruin.
We're talking to Martin Seif, a journalist, author, and three-time Pulitzer Prize nominee. Martin, I said, let's zoom out 30,000 feet. Now I want to zoom out 30,000 miles, if you will.
Wow.
And, your speciality is to look at cycles and cycles that repeat with Mark Twain's qualification. I have been watching and reading people like Ray Dalio and this YouTuber who are studying economic cycles, but they're on a very macro level. And both of these people have traced great empires of our time, like the Roman Empire and the Spanish Empire, the Danish Empire, the British Empire, and now today you might say the American Empire. And they all followed the same life cycle. They represented innovation, freedom, and most importantly, a reserve currency, while another empire was in decline. And there are four stages of development for these empires. The first phase being the build up, the second phase being the good old days, the golden ages of those countries.
Yeah.
And then the third is a challenger, another country that is doing it better and faster and with a safer currency. And then the smart money starts to leave. And before you know it, the country, the empire is in decline. What phase of that cycle do you see America right today?
We're in the terminal phase, but there is hope because we are in one of the cyclic crises that I predict in my book. And there's another long range economic theorist who died 90 years ago. Nobody knows about him in America, though he's in history. He was a Russian economist called Nikolai Kondratiev. And he traced exactly the same crisis that the great scholars you have just mentioned have traced more recently as well. He was one of the great pioneers in this. And he traced 50 to 55-year economic cycles. And he said in a free market society, levels of speculation will get so out of control after 50 or 60 years, and levels of debt, that there will be a crisis and a crash. And therefore, at first, the communists the Marxists loved him. But then the second shoe dropped because Kondratiev said this does not mean capitalism is doomed. It means, on the contrary, capitalism renews itself every 50 years. You have to have period. Andrew Mellon, a very much abused Secretary of the Treasury under 3 U.S. presidents in the 1920s, advised Herbert Hoover in the late 1920s that the way to deal with the Great Depression was to let prices and stocks and wages at first collapse and fall, and don't try and bail out companies that are going bankrupt. Let them go bankrupt, and the resources that are liberated and will then be turned into new, more positive directions. And because at first people are willing to work for much lower prices, there will be new companies starting, and they will be more efficient, more enterprising companies. They will react against all the mistakes of the immediate past generation. And you have a new era of growth starting. And in fact, we had this earlier in the most successful recovery in American history to this day from any serious economic crisis. And liberal economists and Marxists never discuss it. It is the recovery of 1921 onwards from the great catastrophe of 1920 under Woodrow Wilson. And the recovery was held by Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon and by one of the most underestimated, despised, and admirable presidents in our history, Warren Harding, and it's a completely unknown story. But by contrast, Herbert Hoover made an even bigger mistake than Franklin Roosevelt. He was an even bigger collectivist than Roosevelt. He froze wages and prices to keep them in place during the Great Depression. And instead of protecting standards of living, this meant that there couldn't be a full crash and a super rapid recovery as we had in 1921. He defied the free market. He claimed to be defending it, but it was a lie. Hoover was an engineer. He was a top-down statist. He was all in favor of this in the 1920s. He hated the free market. He hated free enterprise. He hated open competition. He hated Wall Street at its creative best. And that's why we had the catastrophe of the 1920s, and it continued under Franklin Roosevelt, and we didn't reach 1929 levels of prosperity in market terms until 1954. But the free market works. Mrs. Thatcher deregulated the City of London in 1986 in ways that it had not been free to do since 1931. And the result was a tremendous resurgence in the short term of Britain's prosperity, economic wealth. And all of a sudden, Britain was a huge magnet for overseas investment of industry from the United States, from Japan, from China, from Taiwan. Far from hollowing out British industry, they were rebuilding it in the 1980s and 1990s because of Mrs. Thatcher's free market policies.
Well, on that in that same vein, I think that President Trump is rebuilding our country's economy in real time right before our very eyes. He's talking about the potential of eliminating the income tax, which I think would celebrate him as the greatest president of all time in our country, and replacing it with tariffs, basing it on trade. And he is hoping, I think, and working, his strategy is to raise the tide so that all ships improve.
Exactly.
And I think that we have got to insist on budget discipline because right now our spending is irrational, it's out of control, and 10% of it goes to fraud. If we could just eliminate the fraud, waste, and abuse, we would balance the budget. How simple can you be? But Ilhan Omar and the Democrats, oh no, you're sexist, racist, homophobes, isolationist. I mean, every ist that you can come up with. And I think it's simply because of one thing. They're in on it. They don't want the spigot to be shut off.
Exactly. President Trump in his 2016 campaign was campaigning in working class, post-industrial, deindustrialized downtown Detroit, overwhelmingly ethnic African American community. And he gave I covered that speech, and he gave a heartbreaking speech. He appealed to the people of Detroit, and they listened to him. He said, give me a chance. If it doesn't work, go back to the Democrats. But look at what the Democrats' policies, look at what these collectivist socialist policies have brought you over the past 50 years. How can it be worse? Now, in the 2016 election, President Trump won a greater majority of the African-American vote and the Hispanic-American vote than any other Republican in modern times. And in 2020, after 4 years of his policies, his percentage of the votes from those communities were much higher. And in 2024, they were higher yet. And this was a key reason why the defeat of Kamala Harris by such wide margins in 2024 took the liberal establishments in both Europe and most of all in America itself on the eastern and western seaboards so much by surprise. They assumed that the African American community and the Hispanic American community would stay down on the plantation. They would simply say, yes, massa, we let you elitists but plunge us into more deindustrializing, green reformist, idealistic nonsense and ruinous socialism and waste and steal all our money. So all our efforts are for nothing, and more of our children will die of fentanyl than ever before. And you expect us still to tug our hairs and say, yes, massa, thank you so much. And increasing numbers of people in the African American and Hispanic communities rejected this. They saw what worked and they saw what didn't work.
Well, Lyndon Baines Johnson ushered in the Great New Deal, and not the New Deal, the Great Society.
Yes.
And in the course of doing so, made the statement that's been repeated many, many times that after that, Black people would never vote for a Republican ever again, although he did not use the word Black people. He was almost right, but I think the miscalculation was that along with the Great Society, he also desegregated schools and gave Black people an equal opportunity for education. Yes. And what we're seeing is that as Blacks become better educated and more knowledgeable about the ways of the world, their eyes are open and they have begun to think for themselves. And they're no longer relegated to just thinking based on what someone tells them to do. And that has been the Democrat strategy for 60 years. And I think they're at the end of that leash now. Do you agree? Am I being too controversial in making those statements?
Well, if you are, you're not alone. I agree with you 100%. I think that's a brilliant and incisive and extremely important analysis. I agree with you, man, all the way.
Well, I think we just got to keep spreading the word. One last thing, I heard you talk about George, was it Herbert Walker Bush, I think? And I think it was probably during his presidency that we had Rodney King somewhere back along there. And he said,
oh, I remember that. Yes.
He said, can't we all just get along? And it seems so simplistic, but to me, there's something so real about the aspiration. And I just wonder, I look at you, you're an Irishman. You live in New Jersey. I live in Florida. I'm my ancestors are from Scotland and England. And we agree on so much, even though our backgrounds are very different. I just wonder, and I love Trump, but I don't think he is much of what's the right word? He does not bring people together.
Yeah.
And George Bush, the only thing I really heard him say that I liked was we needed a kinder, gentler nation. And I'm just wondering if you and I and people that we could influence could not begin a conversation in America today and start it out with the simple phrase, on what do we agree?
I like that. Yes.
Would that not bring us together in the end? Because I got to tell you, we all got two eyeballs and two ears and two legs, two arms, hands, and a brain. And we've got so much in common and so much to rally around. But we just seem to focus on our differences and the things that we don't necessarily agree on. And then when you put it all on a ledger, you have all the things we agree on, the few things we disagree on. They're really kind of trivial.
Yes.
Are they not?
Yes. You know, I hear you say this and I hear the way you say it. And I'm so old. Well, actually, you're almost as old as I am. You'll remember this too. I hear President Reagan speaking through you, and the best of President Kennedy for that matter. And there are times like the Oklahoma bombing, a terrible business, or 9/11, or in times of great national disaster, when such heartbreaking things happen. And as you say, this is exactly what happens. People from all across society come together. I had a friend, obviously I won't identify him by name, there's no need, but a very conservative fellow from the Midwest who always had a cultural, virtual hatred of New York City. And then he saw the way New Yorkers rallied so heroically after the horrific bombings of 9/11. And he said he cried for the people of New York. And, he was frustrated that he wasn't in a position to go just as a volunteer and go out there and help himself. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly the kind of common humanity that brings us so together.
Well, you're very kind, Martin. You're an inspirational figure. And thank you for the nice, undeserved compliment. But I do.
No, it's a very
it.
deserved compliment. Thank you.
Well, I think we should maybe try and start a movement, and I think it could become organic and it could go viral, because I think there is a yearning deep inside of each one of us to love each other and to get along.
Yes.
And it's the damn leaders, I'm convinced, that divide us. And they're doing it, again, out of political greed for power, because that is how they maintain their base. And I want the base to stop. I think the parties have outgrown their usefulness. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, black, white, straight, gay, all this noise just needs to go out the window. And we just need to make America the focus. We are all Americans. And I'm sorry, Ilhan Omar, that's your invitation to leave.
Exactly. Look, I'm a combative Irishman, and I'm much more at home, bang everybody in the head. In cycles of change, I trace the central role of the Irish in the dynamics of domestic American politics, especially in the big city machines from after the Civil War onwards. Right. And we just had a gift for it, and we had a passion for it. But also, of course, we like a good argument, especially over a drink or three,
I was just about to get to that point. As an Irishman, I bet you'll drink a pint with your fellow man.
It is not inconceivable.
We'll get on down here and let's
All
have
the
a
way,
pint
man,
together.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Martin Sheaf. And that is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Stay tuned. We've got another compelling interview right coming up. Time magazine had a front cover decades ago on why Johnny can't read, making me wonder, why are we still talking about it today? Chris Papps is a reporter in Baltimore for the Fox affiliate, and he has authored a book called Failure Factory. Kind of says it all, really. Chris, what got you interested in the topic?
Well, I'm an investigative reporter. I work for Fox 45 News in Baltimore. And Before that, I was an investigative reporter for the ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C. And the company that I work for, Sinclair Broadcasting Group, called me one day and said, hey, you want to come to Baltimore, leave D.C., and start this thing called Project Baltimore, working for Fox 45 News. And what we are is that we're a team of 5, and there's 2 photographer editors, 2 producers, and myself. And we focus purely on public education. And to answer your question, the reason we chose public education is largely because of how you open this segment, that we can see that our students are underperforming academically, but yet at the same time, we can see that we are putting incredible amounts of money into public education. And when you look at Baltimore specifically, you see a city that is one of the most funded large school systems in the country, according to federal data, but it's also one of the lowest performing large school systems in the country, according to federal data. And that's why I wrote Failure Factory, because after doing this for 8 or 9 years, we started in January 2017. I think that people need to really understand what's happening in our public education system, because it's a problem. And I know that we're going to talk about it throughout your show here, but we have a significant problem in public education, and it's a very expensive problem. And if we don't fix it, we're going to be in big trouble if we're not already in big trouble.
So what conclusions did you come to in writing the book? What is the core of the problem, would you say? Or is it just that easy? Maybe it's a multitude of factors, probably, but.
Sure. So in 2017, in January of 17, when I came from DC to Baltimore to start this Project Baltimore project, a lot of people had said to me, because I had already developed a pretty good reputation as an investigative journalist in the nation's capital, they said, listen, Chris, if you're going to do this, if you're really going to dive into public education, what you're going to find is that public schools no longer prioritize educating kids. They prioritize the acquisition of funding, and then they use that funding to hire adults to grow the political power and influence of public education. And this was 2017. And I didn't want to believe it. So my dad was a public school teacher in Pennsylvania. I grew up outside of Philadelphia. He was a public school teacher for 35 years in the teachers union. My brother and I went to public schools K through 12 in Pennsylvania. So to hear somebody tell me that the public education system isn't prioritizing educating kids, I just didn't believe it. And 8 years later, I wrote Failure Factory because I now do believe that it's true. After looking at the data and doing this every day of my professional life for the past 8 or 9 years, I do believe that there's very strong evidence to show, or even to prove, that the public education system does not prioritize educating kids. It prioritizes the acquisition of funding.
Well, I think I know the answer to my question. I'll ask it anyway. Is it just Baltimore, or is that symptomatic of a more global problem?
Oh, this is nationwide, because when you have the amount of money going into public education, what that means is that you have people who want that money. And they're not necessarily getting into public education because they want to help kids. Many of them do, but we're seeing a growing number of people that are getting into public education because it's a means to acquire great wealth. And that's why I wrote Failure Factory, because I want to show the rest of the country what is happening, what is really going on inside of our public schools, because we cannot continue to go down this path. And I make the point in the book that Baltimore is really at the end stages of what a failing public education system does to a society, does to a community. If you look at Baltimore, you see a city that used to have around 1 million people. It's now down to 550,000, and every year it's getting smaller and smaller. And every year, Baltimore City is consistently ranked one of the most dangerous, crime-ridden, murderous places in the Western Hemisphere, not just America, in the Western Hemisphere. 20 to 25% of the people in the city live in poverty. There's 15,000 empty buildings that are just blighted structures. It's a really struggling city. And I make the case that all of that stuff I just mentioned, it's not the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. The problem is that there's a failing public education system that is simply not giving the people of the city the education that they need to be able to take care of themselves and their family. So that's the point of Failure Factory. I'm taking you inside of these public schools. I'm showing you how they spend their money, where they spend their money, how they're manipulating, how they're changing grades to push kids through the system to eventually give them a diploma that some of them, and this is not hyperbole, a diploma that some of them cannot read. That's the state of public education in Baltimore, and it's certainly in many other places around the country.
It makes you scratch your head, really. I mean, after spending all of this money, it does sound like a failed system for the most part. And most of the people that I know attended private school. They weren't even dependent on the public education system. Yet the people in public education are defiant when it comes to vouchers or home education or charter schools. You name an alternative and they're violently opposed to it. You would think they would care.
Well, the status quo makes them a lot of money. Why would they want to deviate from the status quo? It's like we just talked about. People are getting into public education now because it's a means to acquire wealth. Let's just talk about the money just for a second.
Yeah.
So what Failure Factory is, it's an 8-year study, right? And I think that really what makes this book different than a lot of other books about education is, first, it's not written by a scholar. It's not wonky college talk. It's written by me, writing the way that I'm talking to you now. It's written by a reporter who's been covering this stuff every day. And I take you year by year, and I show you really what's going on. So over the 8 years, we'll start in 2016, 2017 school year to the 2024, those 8 school years. In 2017, Baltimore City Schools' budget was $1.3 billion. In 2024, 8 school years later, it was $1.7 billion. So the school system got $400 million more dollars a year over those 8 school years.
With a declining enrollment, right? If the city population went from 1 million to 500,000, I assume that would show up in the enrollment in public schools.
Of course, yes. So they got about a 30% increase in funding. The graduation rate in 2016, 2017, was 70%. The graduation rate in 2024, which is the last year for which we have data because public education data lags a year, it was 70%. So with a 30% increase in funding, the graduation rate didn't budge. So taxes went up. Taxpayers are being asked to put a massive amount of additional money into public education, and there is no return on that investment. So let's talk about a little bit more student outcomes. In 2017, 11% of the kids in Baltimore City were proficient in math. 11. In 2024, it was 10%. 90% of the kids in Baltimore City did not test proficient in math, with a $400 million increase in funding per year. And I'll just go to one more data point here, and I think this really drives the point home. In 2017, Baltimore City had 5,142 teachers, 5,142. In 2024, 8 years later, 8 school years later, they had 5,142 teachers. They got $400 million additional dollars a year and did not hire any additional teachers. And it goes back to the premise of Failure Factory. The priority of the school systems are not to educate kids, is to acquire funding and then use that funding to hire adults. Now, in those 8 school years, Baltimore City hired 1,300 additional employees. 1,300. None of them were teachers. The money isn't getting to the classroom. And I make the case in the book is because it's not designed to go into the classroom. The money is designed to go to the adults.
Well, I grew up in Georgia and raised my family there. And we hadn't elected a Republican governor since Reconstruction. Roy Barnes, the then current governor, took on the teachers union and tried to hold them accountable. It kind of backfired because they drummed him out of office. He lost his second term. Interestingly, just last week, I interviewed Governor Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin, and he had a similar story to tell. He took on not only the teachers unions, but the public employee unions, and he lost for his third term by 1%. These people seem to wield disproportionate power to their positions in life. Is that a place to start looking at reform?
In Maryland, the most powerful political entity is the teachers union. Without a doubt. I mean, that's a fact. It's not even arguable. I don't know if anybody in Maryland who pays attention to politics would even suggest that that's not true. They are the most powerful political entity in this state. And oftentimes what we're seeing is that the teachers union is not the students union. The teachers union's job is not to educate kids. The teachers union's job is to grow the power and influence of the teachers union. All right, now, so you got to look at it from that perspective. And this is the case that I make in Failure Factory, because if you're going to look at this stuff, you got to look at it from the perspective of motivation. And the teachers union is like any other group in America. Right? They're there to grow the power and influence of their group. It's sort of like your show. You know, you're trying to grow your followers. You're trying to grow your revenue. The company I work for, I'm doing the same thing. I go to work every day because the hope is that we grow in revenue and we grow in influence. And the teachers unions are doing the same thing. But it's a political influence. It's not an educational influence. They're not there to educate the kids. So you have to look at it from that perspective if you want to make reform, because when the teachers unions are the loudest is right before budget season. That is when they're holding their rallies. That is when they're trying to get teachers together to stand outside your state house or your state capitol to say, we want more money for public schools. But what the data that we just talked about, 10% of kids in Baltimore City schools are proficient in math. 10% with $1.7 billion going into that school system. The union doesn't rally for that.
That's a de facto failing grade. That's an F.
But when that data comes out, the union's not rallying to correct that.
Yeah.
The union's only rallying to get more money.
Well, I will correct one thing that you said, not to be contentious, but just to set the record straight. I don't do this for the money. If I did, I would be destitute. I do it because I have an intellectual curiosity, and I do watch our analytics. But my solution for growing our channel is to put out a better product. If you don't believe me, ask Anthony sitting over here. We talk about it every single day. How can we do it better? What can we do to encourage more viewers? Not clickbait, not buying it. We just want to put out a better product. Now, so I'm old fashioned, you know, I'm an old guy. Oh, well, he's a conservative. Yes, I am, because I just believe in doing it the old fashioned way. That's not trying to be boastful. I'm just telling you that's my mindset. Would that not serve our public education system well if we started grading teachers and started evaluating their outcomes rather than succumbing to their political pressure? How do we change it?
So I deal with that a lot in Failure Factory, and I talk about that a lot. And there's a couple avenues that you can go about discussing this. And this is it's a really complicated. Actually, it's not complicated. It's a wide topic to discuss. So there's a couple things here that we can go over. The first thing is that there's a teacher shortage in America. We know that. And it's not because people don't want to be in the classroom helping kids. It's because of the environment that many public school systems have created that is forcing teachers out. One of the main narratives and storylines in Failure Factory is that for 5 years, we investigated a massive grade-changing scandal in Baltimore City. And I know Atlanta had a massive grade change.
Atlanta had the same thing. I lived through it.
They had the same.
Yeah.
Yep, they had the same thing. Well, Baltimore had the same thing. So we had to sue Project Baltimore, Fox 45 News. We had to sue Baltimore City Public Schools to get public records the school system refused to release because they knew how bad the grade-changing situation was. And we went to court and we won. And the judge said that the school system willfully and knowingly violated the law by not handing over the documents. A judge in Baltimore City said the school system knew they were breaking the law, but they did it anyway to hide possible wrongdoing. So how is this an answer to your question? Because if you're a teacher and you're in the classroom and someone's going in and changing your grades, that is deflating. And that is happening all around the country because upper level management want kids to pass. The focus is on passing kids, not educating kids, because when you pass kids, they're more likely to stay enrolled, and funding is based on enrollment. So in Baltimore City, we had this massive scandal where teachers were failing kids, and then somebody would go into their grade book and just change it. And a lot of times when you look at, like you had mentioned about grading teachers or evaluating teachers, a lot of this is out of the teacher's hands. And I think that's a big reason why we're having a teacher shortage, is because the teachers aren't given power. They're not given authority in their own classrooms. They're not able to discipline kids. They're not even given, respect for the own grades that they put into the grade book. I talked to teachers in Failure Factory that failed kids in Spanish, for example, in high school. And then a couple weeks later, that student will walk across a stage and graduate with a Maryland high school diploma. And the teacher goes back to the principal and goes, "How did this kid graduate? I failed him in Spanish." And it's because somebody went into their grade book and changed the grades. That is what we're seeing. We're seeing it in a big way in Baltimore.
If when I was a kid, our teachers used to have a grade book. She'd leave it on her desk. Some kids would go up there and look inside of it to see what it showed about them. Some kids, one or two, would actually try and change their grades. If they got caught, they would get kicked out of school. It was a serious offense. And now you're telling me we have the people that are running the schools going into the teacher's grade book and changing the grades. My God. When we had the cheating scandal in Atlanta, they literally prosecuted, I can't remember how many people, but it was over a dozen, maybe 2 dozen. And some teachers actually went to jail and some administrators. I honestly thought at the time that would be a great deterrent. Instead, it sounds like the teachers around the country looked at it as a roadmap on how to get more money.
No, not the teachers. No, the administrators, because you have, when we sued Baltimore City, and I have the emails in the book, we got 8,000 emails, many of them from teachers writing emails to their administrators saying, "Why are you changing my grade? This student did not deserve to graduate. This student did not deserve to pass. I failed them. They never showed up to class. They didn't do any homework. Who is going into my grade book?" And they're digital grade books now. "Who is going in and changing the grade to pass these students?" This is happening in a big way. And I think it's really leading to a lot of the educational issues we're having in America, because teachers don't want to live in those current conditions. They don't want to spend their professional lives trying to help kids. And then somebody above them who's not in the classroom comes in and greatly affects that child's life by passing them and showing that child that they're not going to be held accountable for their actions. And that's largely what we're seeing in public education now. And if you have any teachers that are listening to us right now, I know that they're nodding their head, because the teachers aren't given authority in their classrooms. They're not given authority to discipline kids. A child acts out in the class, they send them to the principal sends them right back. And why do they do that? Because it goes back to the premise of Failure Factory, my book, Failure Factory, because the schools are not prioritizing educating kids. They're prioritizing the funding. And how do you get more money? By doing everything you can to keep every student enrolled so the money continues to come in.
So in Minnesota, Nick Shirley just revealed, although he didn't just reveal, it's been known for 10 years, but his videos went viral. And so now everybody knows that money flowed from the federal government to the city government, which then paid for 1,000 children's daycare centers, which were just shams. They had brick and mortar, but the windows were blacked out, the doors were locked, and no kids came in. Is that what you're talking about? Or is it just moving money from the federal government to the state government, which I suspect that a bureaucrat would rationalize, well, they're taxing us so we can send it up to them. We may as well get it sent back to us. Better to come back to Maryland than Georgia. Do you think that's what's going on? Or is there outright corruption and fraud?
Oh, there is certainly outright corruption and fraud. I document this over 8 years of Failure. About 10% of a school system's budget is federal dollars. Most of it comes from local and then state, and about 10%, 10%, somewhere in there are federal dollars. And that's pretty consistent throughout the country. And that's part of the reason that I wrote this book, is because this affects everybody. This is not a local issue. Public education is a national issue. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about things that are happening throughout the country, because there is just simply so much money that is being put in. But as far as fraud, let me talk about, I'll give you a couple more examples from my book of what's happening in Baltimore City. I had, in one of the schools that we investigated, a high school in Baltimore City, I had student transcripts given to me by somebody at the school. And what I found was there was a student who graduated who missed 120 days of school his senior year. 120 days. There's 180 days in a school year. He missed 120. So on the transcript, there was an address. I went to the kid's house and I knocked on his door. He was 20 years old at this point. And I have the entire exchange in the book of the conversation that he and I had, because he answered the door. I had my cameras all around me, and I identified myself. I said, I have a mic on. Can I ask you a couple questions about your high school experience? And he said to me that there are kids graduating who should not be graduating. But the school system is taking off on their state diplomas and giving these students high school diplomas that the students themselves are telling me that they did not earn. Now, if that doesn't sound like fraud, I'm not sure what does. I think that is fraud.
Well, where is the money landing? Where is it ending up?
It's ending up in the hiring of the adults for the school system. So
it's not stealing. They're not stealing the money. I mean, you could say they're stealing, but it's not surreptitiously going into the pockets of a few people, like in Minneapolis, where it's, they're Somalis that are there collecting the money and sending it back to the Middle East, who are funding terrorist groups, is the belief.
Well, it depends on how you want to look at this. So when you have public education that is funded based on enrollment, how accurate is the enrollment? And here's where I'm going with this. So in Failure Factory, we did a long investigation into, are the enrollment numbers even accurate? And it turns out they're not. And in Maryland, enrollment, and it's like this in many states, enrollment is based upon how many kids are in school on one day. In Maryland, that one day is September 30th. That one day determines the entire funding that a school gets. So what schools will do is that they'll just try to get kids to school on that one day, enroll them quickly. And that kid never even has to come to class the rest of the school year, and that school will get funding for that kid. And this is happening. We've documented that this is happening, but that is a way that schools are increasing the amount of money that they're getting. And in Failure Factory, some of the investigations that we have done have led to the school systems giving money back to the state for fraudulent enrollment, kids that were enrolled that never should have been. And this is happening all across the country because it's very easy to do. And this year, we did an update to one of the stories where in Maryland, and last year, there were 11,000 kids, equals $168 million in funding, 11,000 kids that were enrolled and then went missing. Now think about that for a second. This is Maryland State Department of Education data. 11,000 kids were enrolled in their school on September 30th, and then the school couldn't find them after that. So taxpayers gave schools $168 million to educate kids who were not there. They were not in the school. But this is allowed to happen in states like Maryland.
Is anybody doing a perp walk, or is it going to happen?
Nope. No. Everything that we've talked about so far, everything, the grade changing, graduating kids who can't read, graduating kids who miss 120 days of school, fraudulent funding and enrollment, no one, to my knowledge, has been arrested or charged with any crimes for any of this. And that's part of the problem. That's one of the big reasons that I wrote Failure Factory. We started this podcast by saying, listen, I'm trying to inform people about what's going on in the public schools, and you're hitting on everything right now. You're hitting on the fraud. You're hitting on the amount of money that's going to educate kids They're graduating kids who can't deserve it. This is what's happening in our public education system.
It's such a shame as I'm listening to you talk about it. Well, before I go there, who is the gatekeeper? Where does the buck stop? Is it with the U.S. Department of Education? Do they determine the funding?
No.
Are they supposed to be the police?
No. So the buck stops with the elected officials in the states who give the money to the school systems. So about 90% of a school system's funding in Maryland and in many places around the country comes from state and local dollars, state and local dollars, about 90%.
Yeah, it's half of Georgia's budget, if I'm not mistaken, roughly.
Yeah, so in the county where I am, Baltimore County, over half the county's budget goes to the school system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a massive line item, and that's how important this issue is. But in a state like Maryland, when we do these stories, the local politicians, they don't speak out on it, and that's the issue. We have to elect people that are going to hold public schools accountable, and they're going to say, hey, if we're going to give you a 30% increase in funding, you better deliver.
Yeah.
Graduation rates can't stay the same. Math proficiencies can't go down. But in a state like Maryland, we don't have that.
Yeah, if the politicians speak out on it, they end up like Roy Barnes and Scott Walker, unemployed.
Last March, when President Donald Trump announced that he was going to sign an executive order to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, he mentioned one school system in that speech. He mentioned Baltimore, and he mentioned my reporting that is in Failure Factory. He mentioned that 40%.
Congratulations. That should sell some books.
Yeah, hopefully. He mentioned that 40% of the high schools in Baltimore City, 40% in 2023, did not have a single student test proficient in math. Nearly half of the high schools in Baltimore could not produce one kid who was proficient in math. So Donald Trump mentions that stat. And in the book, I go over how we even determined that, how we were able to analyze the data to show that that was true. But there is nothing in Baltimore City. None of the public officials, none of the elected officials said anything. The Governor Westmore, total crickets. Now, the rest of the country, people like yourself, people like Donald Trump, people outside of Baltimore, outside of Maryland, saying, how can this possibly be true? That is embarrassing. Why are you allowing this to happen? But in Maryland, crickets, they don't say anything.
It's so sad. You know, when I was a kid, a long, long time ago, I wasn't a particularly good student, but I remember vividly that the principal of my school and the teachers in the classrooms were among the most respected and underpaid members of the community. But everybody revered them. And they really, helped shape me as an individual because as difficult as I was as a student, I had this sense that they really cared about me. They really wanted to find a way to reach me, to get me the learning that I needed in order to be successful in life. I yearned for those days. We also started the day with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and a prayer, followed by a verse from the Bible. Is there any way we can get back to the good old days and restore education in America and live up to our potential?
Yes. And that's exactly why I wrote this book. It's exactly why I wrote this book, because if people know what's going on, it can change. It has to change. There are solutions. There are easy things that we can do that don't cost any money that would really help fix the problem. I'll give you one of them. One of the biggest problems in public education, one of the biggest problems that every teacher that I talk to is discipline of the students.
Yeah, for sure.
And what we're doing is we are not disciplining the kids. And as we talked about before, we're not removing disruptive students from the classroom or the school. So why are we doing that? And we can trace it. We know exactly why that changed. And here's why. In January of 2014, President Barack Obama came to Baltimore and he delivered a speech where he said they looked at the data and the federal government has determined that a disproportionate amount of young minority boys were being suspended and arrested in school. And President Obama came to the conclusion that that's because the schools were discriminating against young minority males.
Yeah, it has to be racial. If there's not a race component, then there's no conversation to be had.
That's what he said. And his Department of Education at the time sent guidance to all 50 states and said, you need to find another way. You're not going to suspend or arrest young minority males anymore for disruptive behavior. And that's what happened. And you see about 2014 moving forward that arrests and suspensions plummeted throughout America. But at the same time, what you see are two things. You see academic outcomes nationally starting to drop, and you see reports of bullying starting to go up. And I document this heavily in Baltimore City with Failure Factory, that I show that at about that same time, 2014 moving forward, we see outcomes drop because we're keeping disruptive kids in the classroom, and we're seeing bullying reports go up because we're keeping kids in the classroom who should not be there, who prior to that were not there. So many ways in public education, what we've done is we've taken what works and we've replaced it with what sounds good. It sounds really good to say, look, our arrests and our suspensions are way down. But what we know what works is to hold students accountable for their actions. I'm not saying that you have to kick them all out of school, but there has to be some sort of accountability so students know that they don't run the school, the adults run the school. That is a huge issue in our public schools right now, is a lack of discipline. And we could fix that real quickly. That wouldn't cost any additional money. It's just the kids need to be held accountable, but the adults don't want to do it. And why? Because it all goes back to the funding.
Well, just use the money and buy a whole lot of rulers, because I can promise you, I was on the back side of a lot of those, and I learned at a pretty young age to behave when I was in school. Just more of the same, get us back to our roots and the things that we know work and work successfully. Well, I'll tell you, Chris, it sure has been a pleasure speaking with you. Chris Papps, he is a great investigative reporter with the Fox affiliate in Baltimore and the head of an investigative team called Project Baltimore with the Fox 45 News Division. And I might also add, you're a hell of a salesman at the same time. What's the name of that book again? Failure Factory. I think I heard that somewhere. Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed being with you today. And I wish you continued success and keep on the hunt. You're doing a good job.
Well, I really appreciate you taking interest in our public schools. And if anything happens and you need some commentary from someone who's in the public education sphere every day, I'd be more than happy to come on. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Noted. And we will take you up on your kind offer. And I do hope that this is the first of many conversations that we will be pleased to have with you. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, sir.